Mineralized Primary School, we thank you for not only the cash prize, but the benefits that we'll get from the drawing tablets. So thank you for your efforts. On behalf of the Mineralized Primary School, we thank you for not only the cash prize, but the benefits that we'll get from the drawing tablets. So thank you for your efforts.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, taking the time out, seeing where we have 200 plus persons online at the moment. I'm Samuel from Allgate Solutions, and I thank you so much for answering the call and registering and joining us today for the PAJ, Pediatric Association of Jamaica's World Autism Day webinar. I'm going to now hand you over quickly to Dr. Agri Sajabi, who is the Director of Healthy Future Pediatrics and a pediatrician at the Black River Hospital, who will be a moderator for this session. Dr. Sajabi, over to you.
Hello, thanks so much, Sam. Good evening, everyone. We're so happy that you could be with us this evening. And this is World Autism Day 2024. So we have quite a lot in store for you for this evening. We're going to get the ball rolling pretty quickly. We want to thank Square Pharmaceuticals for being with us and for making this possible. And before we go any further, I'd like to invite Dr. Curtis Price, our president, to guide us and lead us in a word of prayer before we go any further. Thanks so much. Curtis, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you all for joining us on this very special day, on this very special occasion. Please excuse me, I'm unable to share my screen at this point. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability affecting social communication and behavioral development. Each child is affected differently and has unique strengths and proportionately unique challenges. In Jamaica, with our limited resources, families with autism are particularly challenged with issues related to diagnosis, rehabilitation, access to appropriate educational facilities, long waits due to limited numbers of practitioners, and major financial hurdles. The Pediatric Association of Jamaica has played a major role in helping to alleviate the burdens these families face through educational awareness and other tangibles. We have been involved in a number of major projects bolstering autism awareness, especially this past year. We are particularly energized with profound anticipation for upcoming project. And this will be on June 23, 2024. On that day, the association will be having a 5K run. I'm sure many of you would have heard about it already at the University of the West Indies. And this is to raise funds for children with autism in particular. We invite all attendees today to register. Please register, everybody. Contribute, donate, and spread the word to every contact you know. Together, we are better. On this World Autism Day, we applaud all our children, our parents, our caregivers, our teachers, our psychologists, our doctors, nurses, our pediatricians. And I can't leave out my dear friend Tamara from Square Pharmacy, our sponsor, who has come on board once more. She's now our autism sponsor. And all those who support autism over the years. Kudos to you all, and God bless everyone. Can you bow your heads with me? Loving Father, we just want to lift you up, we want to praise your name, we want to thank you, Lord, for bringing us all here together, where we will celebrate, we will discuss, we will look at what needs to be done to make the lives of children and the families of children with autism much better than they were before. We invite your Holy Presence, Lord, to be with the whole process, to guide us through every step, and help, Lord, that at the end of the day, your name will be glorified, honored, and praised. We bless you and give you thanks. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for that, Curtis. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'd just like to highlight that the United Nations General Assembly designated April 2 World Autism Awareness Day from 2007. So this has been going on since that period of time. And there is nobody better to share the journey of autism with us than one very, very special person. I think she may be the most educated individual I know. And I think quite a few of us can attest to this. The first speaker for this evening will be the Professor, the Honorable Maureen Sams Vaughan, Order of Jamaica, also CD, MBBS, BM in Pediatrics, and a PhD in Epidemiology. She's a Professor Emeritus of UWI and a retired Professor of Child Health, Child Development and Behavior, and UWI Consultant in Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. So indeed, her bio reads like a textbook. I'll give you a few excerpts from it. She is known locally and regionally and internationally for her seminal research, clinical work, and policy development in the field of child health, also in child development and behavior. She's also recognized as an advocate for the well-being of all children, but particularly for those at the early childhood level, those with disabilities, and those who have been victims of violence. She works very closely with families of children with autism. Of course, she has served on a number of UWI positions since 1993, where she was appointed UWI's first professor of child health, child development, and behavior in 2006, which was the year before World Autism Day was first recognized. She has been a consultant in development and behavioral pediatrics at UWI and the director of the weekly Child and Family Clinic for children with developmental disabilities and behavioral disorders since its inception in 1993. She has over 120 publications, including 3 books, several book chapters, several peer-reviewed papers, and a range of child development and behavioral related topics. To go on further, administratively, she was appointed as the head of the Department of Child Health in 2001, a position which was relinquished when she was seconded to the government of Jamaica to guide the development of its new agency, the Early Childhood Commission. So, her greatest achievement is being married to this young gentleman named Kenneth, who's an orthopedic surgeon. They worship at St. Matthew's Anglican Church, and they have 3 young children, Stephanie, an attorney, Nicholas, an environmental scientist, and Christina, a developmental economist for the World Bank. And the topic that Prof. Sams Vaughan will be discussing with us tonight is called The 50 Faces of Autism, an exploration of autism based on age, sex, and severity. So, with no further ado, please welcome Professor Sams Vaughan, who will speak with us as our first speaker for the evening.
Thank you so much, Agri. I like what you think my best achievement is. All right, I'm just sharing screen and Agri, making sure that you're seeing the screen.
Yes,
Perfect.
we are. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. I'm really proud of my association for taking autism on in this way, and especially on World Autism Day at the beginning of Autism Awareness Month. So my topic was given to me, 50 Faces of Autism Spectrum Disorder, an exploration based on age, sex, and severity. And I am going to change that around a bit because I thought it flowed better the other way. So I'm going to show this outline. The first is just a definition and prevalence, just to get some things out of the way. The last webinar, we went through this, but we had a different focus. I'm going to look at the summary of presenting features, and then we're going to look at a few case studies, and then we'll see what we've kind of learned from the case studies. I've pulled out a few things, but persons will learn different things and will see different things out of the case studies. Then I was asked to talk about the sex differences in ASD, and that's a fairly new topic in ASD. And then I wanted to look at what happens when kids get older rather than looking at the younger age. What happens to kids with ASD when they get older? It's quite a concern now because, this boom of very young children, they're all aging now, and we're now having to deal with the challenges of the older child, the adolescent, and the young adult with autism. So just a quick definition that it's a developmental disorder characterized by deficits in social communication and social interaction, and restricted repetitive behaviors, interests, and activities. This is the slide that hits one the most, with a big 417% increase since 2000. Makes me feel a little old here because I kind of knew when it was 1 in 1,000, and now we are at 1 in 36. And next year, we'd see what that figure changes to, because the CDC is the only organization that does this every 2 years. And although the figure says 1 in every 36 children in 2023, the data that they used for that was actually 2021. So when we get the 2025 data next year, it will reflect the prevalence in 2023. But as you can see, it is of significant concern. So I'm going to run through a bit of the presenting features in the young child first, and then I'm going to focus on a few of the features of the adolescent and older child. So in the deficits in social interaction, we look at social emotional reciprocity as a subcategory of that, and we look at changes in nonverbal communicative behavior used for social interaction. And we then look at developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So we're gonna break this down a little bit before we get into the real meat of the matter here. So when we're talking about reciprocity, we're talking about kids' social emotional reciprocity. We're talking about kids who use speech. And remember, we're using speech a lot for reciprocity. That's why we have conversations. That's why we meet with our friends. That's why we call them on the phone. So some of our kids are nonverbal. Some will have delayed speech. Some will have normal or slightly delayed development first, and then they will suddenly stop speaking and regress. Instead of using speech for conversation, however, children with autism often use speech only to meet their needs or to label items. So have a particular affinity for letters and numbers and colors and shapes. And indeed, when they get to preschool and they're smarter than all their peers, because they know their letters so well and because they can count so well and so on, preschool teachers often think, oh, this kid could never have ASD. They're so smart. They're smarter than all the other kids. They often have difficulty in keeping a conversation going or starting a conversation, except if it is in their area of interest. You hit their area of interest, whether this be space or dinosaurs, and they can keep going forever. They may have an abnormal tone or rhythm, and they may use a sing-song voice or robot-like speech. They may speak with an accent, and they may use only Jamaican Standard English. They don't like patois very much because it has less structure than Jamaican Standard English. And so one aspect of the social emotional reciprocity that we see sometimes is inappropriate laughter. In terms of the next bit, so there may be failure to respond to social interactions. So, people may greet them. Mom was telling me this week that, she keeps telling her son that he needs to wave back when kids wave. So they have to be taught some of these things that are very natural to other kids. They have a reduced sharing of interests, emotions, or affects. So, they won't easily tell you that they're sad or they're happy, and they often don't identify those emotions in others. They won't express their own emotions well, and they seem unaware of others' feelings. When they're in a situation where they've hurt someone, it's really, really difficult for them to understand that what they did or said is hurtful. They may inappropriately approach a social interaction by being either passive, aggressive, or disruptive, or sometimes they can be overly affectionate. And they may have limited or unusual eye contact. So they can have an entire conversation with you without looking at you. They may have unusual facial expressions. They may not understand gestures, and so they don't use them very much, pointing and waving. They may put their bodies in unusual positions, limbs, fingers, tensing of the body, walking on tiptoes. And they have difficulty recognizing other cues, so they can't interpret body language or tone of voice, and they can't put the verbal and the nonverbal language together. So, for example, if you wanted to show someone something, you'd get their attention, you'd look them in the eyes, you'd point, and then you'd look back to make sure that they're seeing. They have difficulty putting the verbal and the nonverbal bits together. They often fail to respond to their name or appear not to hear. They can be resistant to affection. Some will cuddle and hug, but refuse kissing. Some will cuddle and hug for just a little bit, and some will reject it altogether. They have difficulty because of course they have difficulty understanding, interpreting emotions. It's difficult for them to do any pretend play. They may show very little interest in their peers. So the same kid in preschool who knows letters and numbers may only want to play with letters and numbers and rather than play with their peers. They have a preference for being by themselves, and often they are described as being in their own world. And they have difficulty modulating their behavior for social context. So they want to run wild in the middle of church. In terms of the repetitive behaviors and activities, they may like to stack or flap or spin objects. Their speech may be repetitive. They may use phrases out of somewhere else, and it may not have any context when they use it, and they may make up words. and only they understand these words that they make up. They may insist on sameness, adherence to routines. So they may show extreme distress at very small changes. Somebody moved a toy from one position to another. They need to wear a particular color shirt on a particular day. They need their parents to drive the same route all the time to school. They sometimes establish rituals for themselves, and they may have difficulty with transitions. Because of their sensitivities, they may have a very limited diet and insist on having the same foods. And part of this sameness results in them having limited topics of conversation that they have interest in. So I've kind of spoken to you very generally about these things and given a few tidbits or examples along the way. Let me just get this part. And they may be hyper or hyporeactive to sensory input, or they may have an unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. This is a key feature. Their sensitivity to sound, so they cover their ears to loud sounds. Today, parents were wondering why the child was screaming when it was their birthday and everybody was singing happy birthday. But of course, this is the loudest part of the birthday when the crowd is together and everybody is singing loudly. Sensitivity to touch, liking to rub surfaces, taste, liking to put things in their mouth a lot, and sensitivity to smell, smelling every food that they've been given, and sometimes smelling people. They may be visually fascinated with lights or fans, and they may have an indifference to pain or temperature. Just to say that how children present, and after I've reeled out all these symptoms, just to say that everybody doesn't have everything, and everybody doesn't have everything to the same degree. So the spectrum bit in the middle is really critical in the term autism spectrum disorder. About 60% of children have a low or borderline IQ, but many, even with an IQ that is within the age range, within the normal range, may have learning difficulties. Sometimes they have super skills, so advanced visual spatial skills, so they can do puzzles extremely well. And they're hyperlexic. Sometimes they don't need anybody to teach them how to read. They can read. They learn how to read themselves. But reading, meaning that they decode words. So sometimes, even though they can decode words, they can't understand what it is that they have read. In the older child, we see a slightly different picture. The child who's presenting first in adolescence, typically they have an IQ that's within the normal range. They're socially awkward. They don't understand where they don't belong, and they're often considered weird by their peers. They have very few friends, if any at all, and they're often bullied. You see that as many as 2/3 of them get bullied, and that's because the kids, adolescents know when kids are different. They don't know why they're different, but they know when they're different. And difference is scary for some persons. And one of the ways to react to that feeling scared or uncertain is bullying. And so bullying happens very often to these children. They're often considered rude or inappropriate to adults because they have no social filters. I mean, last week I was doing a test and of a kid with autism, and he was talking to me about something, and then I said, "Oh, I have 2 brothers," and he said, "But I didn't ask you." And a 7-year-old a 7-year-old who has social filters wouldn't have responded in that way. Might have thought it, but they probably might not have said it. I mentioned the accent, the Jamaican Standard English, the absence of patois, and formal speech. So typically, actually, really, all those LY words often end up in conversation. Technically, they all end up in the conversation. And they have a very adult-like approach to conversation and to discussion. Drives teachers crazy, that adult-like approach. A key feature is the impaired fine motor skills, and we will see this as I go through through some of the cases. And I often mention the difficulty with literature because if they can't understand another person's perspective, they will absolutely never do well in literature. So let's look at severity, and I'm going to start with severity with an interesting case, DT. And no, I know there's somebody else who has initials of DT who is very prominent right now, but it's not that person. So DT was brought by his parents to see his doctor at 5 years old. Father was a lawyer. His mother was a college graduate. He was coming to attention fairly late in life because he was 5 years old. But the doctor could get a lot of information because his dad kept meticulous notes and provided all the early life details. He was the first child. He had normal birth weight, normal perinatal history. His dad had noticed that eating had been a challenge. They had to change formula all the time. And he was not interested in the foods that other children loved. His motor development was age appropriate. At 1 year, he started humming and singing many tunes. It didn't concern anybody. By 2 years, he had a memory for faces and names. He learned and recited poems well above his years. So, of course, everybody was saying, wow, he's really smart. Then he learned the alphabet forwards and backwards and counted to 100. But he was not asking or answering questions, except if it related to his interests, the rhymes and the songs. At 2 years, he developed an obsession with spinning items. He was happiest when he was left alone. He didn't care whether his parents came or went. If anybody interfered with him, he had temper tantrums. At 3 years, he was sent to a home for a change of environment. He continued to spin objects and ignore the children in his environment. His mother was very close to him. She couldn't stand him being away from her for so long, and she decided it was best for her to have him at home. Well, when he got to the doctor, this was the doctor's observations. He had a normal physical exam. He wondered about smiling, but there was limited spontaneous activity. He did some unusual things. He crossed and uncrossed his fingers in the air. He shook his head from side to side. He hummed and sang the same 3 notes. He spun items. He dropped items to the floor with great pleasure. He arranged sticks and beads and everything else in colors. And most actions were done in exactly the way he had done them before. So, for example, when he was given beads, he strung them in the way that his father had first taught him to string beads using exactly that sequence of colors. And he had some verbal rituals. So when he wanted to get down, he would say, DT, do you want to get down? He would call his name and say, do you want to get down? There was repetitive and stereotyped speech. He kept saying the word chrysanthemum over and over and over. And the way he used words had inflexible meanings. So his father was teaching him the difference between yes and no. Do you want to be lifted up? Yes, and then he would lift him up. Do you want to be lifted up? No, and then he wouldn't. After that, yes meant being lifted up, because that was the context in which he had learned the word yes. He ignored the peers and adults, and he walked away if they approached him. And when they gave him stuff to play with, he scribbled, while others of his age were already coloring and coloring well. After he left the doctor's office, a lot of information was sent later on about him and what he was doing. He learned to read fluently quite quickly. He played simple tunes on the piano. Pronoun confusion that he had had before had improved significantly. His attention had improved. His concentration had improved. His contact with the environment has also improved. He was more engaged with people. He enjoyed being praised. This was, a big deal to his mom. However, his repetitive speech had persisted, and then other behaviors had emerged. He started chewing paper. He started climbing excessively. He was getting into everything. He put food in his hair. He was giggling and whispering. So there were still things, there had been improvement, but there were still things that concerned them. Then he started school. The principal was his mother's friend, and so he started school there. The first day was trying for the teacher, but he improved each day. After a month, he was following the class routines. He stood in line. He answered questions. Initially, he didn't report what was happening at school at home when he was asked. After a few months in school, however, he became much more aware of his environment. He spoke more, he asked questions, he played games with his peers, and he started reporting what was happening at school. his obsessions with numbers persisted. He started giving everyone a number. And here is my first case. So this is Donald Triplett. Donald Triplett is the first person in the case series of autism that was published in 1943. He was born in 1933 and he died last year at 89 years old. So everything that I've just told you was about happening in the 1930s, but it could describe so many of the patients that we still see today. And so here was the paper that Leo Kanner first put out, Autistic Disturbances of Affective Contact. And you will see case 1, Donald T., was first seen in October 1938 at the age of 5 years. So this was the beginning of Donald's story. Let's see what happened later on. Donald attended a regular high school and college. He graduated with passes in math and French. He got his driver's license. He lived in a small town in Forest, Mississippi that had 3,000 persons. As an adult, he lived with his parents until they died, and then he lived alone in his home. He had friends who visited him regularly. He had a particular routine. He drove to the golf course and played the same round of golf every single day, drove the same way, and he traveled. Donald's quality of life was very different than many others. At the time, I mentioned a home because that was what happened in the 1930s. Institutionalization, children were put in institutions, and his mother took him out. Apart from supporting him at home, the community also included him in everything and protected him. So now I would place Donald Triplett as a kind of middle in terms of the spectrum. I'm going to go now a little bit further back to the more severe persons. At the end, I'll just say some of the lessons that came out through these 3 cases. BJ was of normal birth, twitching at 2 weeks. Low blood sugar was found at 2 weeks. Then seizures emerged at 18 months and at 3 years. And both times she was seen in hospital and discharged. At 3 years old, she had regression in her language. She spun in circles and she covered her ears to loud noises. At 5 years, she was diagnosed with a metabolic disorder that required human growth hormone treatments, which parents could not afford. So they proceeded to feed her through the night once they understood what was causing her hypoglycemia. At 6 years, she was diagnosed with ASD. She started school with a shadow, but significant aggression emerged once she started school. And actually, it had emerged a little bit before school because much of the aggression was directed at her mother. But when she got to school, it was directed at the shadow and then at her teachers. She was unable to attend school consistently. I first saw her at 8 years. Both her parents had heel and current scars on their arms from her scratching at them. Her mother had left her job and devoted her time to caring for her at home. Initial treatment with Risperdal reduced her aggression significantly and allowed more social interaction with her parents and her peers. School attendance, however, was still a challenge due to her behavior. She had, on more than one occasion, left home, walked to the store across a major road, and left the store with food items that she had requested earlier in the day, but had not been given. The local police were engaged about her care, and locks had to be placed on the door to keep her inside while her parents were asleep. Her aggression worsened at 10 years. She still has not attended school with the regularity that other children can. And she's now also under the care of a psychiatrist. So we move from the kind of middle of the road to the kind of life-changing events of severe autism spectrum disorder. Let's go to LA. At 3 years, he was recommended to repeat kindergarten because his fine motor skills were not the same as his peers. At 6 years, in grade 1, he often did no work. The teachers would report he was inattentive, never aggressive, never rude. But if the teachers were insistent on him doing work he didn't want to do, he shut down and he was always sent to the guidance counselor. He had an assessment, a report was produced. The parents can't recall what was in this report, and I've never seen it, but his teachers responded with a more caring approach, and he seemed to do better with caring teachers. He cried at the commencement of every single academic year. A second assessment at grade 4, because of persisting academic concerns, identified problems in math and literacy. Individual tuition was provided by his parents. Persisting academic concerns led to re-evaluation later on, and that found low average cognitive function, a learning disorder, particularly in math, impaired graphomotor or fine motor skills, impaired linguistic skills, impaired executive function, and ADHD. He was provided with a shadow at grade 6. He hated this. In his post-GSAT placement, he was placed at a traditional high school. He did no work again at high school. However, he told his parents that he had researched ADHD, diagnosed himself, and thought he would benefit from medication. So I first saw him at 13 years old. His fine motor concerns had persisted. He resisted writing long essays. His anxiety had persisted. He wet himself prior to the consultation, and he had wet himself at his examinations. Social isolation that had been part of his experience in the primary years had improved somewhat at high school. Behavior forms showed that both parents and teachers thought that he acted too old for his age. His IQ was superior when he was assessed, but he had a specific learning disorder in mathematics. In fact, at 13 years, he was functioning in maths at about 7 years. When his ASD diagnosis was being discussed with his parents and with him present, he calmly looked at me and said that he's read about the DSM-5 criteria and he wished to know which aspects of the criteria he fulfilled. So both his parents looked at me puzzled, and I said, it's okay, I can answer, it's fine. So here we have 3 cases. We have Donald, the very first kid, who had that diagnosis. He would not have been the first kid with ASD. He was the first kid in that case series that became series of 11 children that became, the kind of Bible. He kind of set the stage for the features of autism that would later be described. So Donald showed his history, showed a family history. Did anybody pick up about his dad? 33 pages of notes, carefully identifying every single thing that he did. And remember, it was the 1930s, right? So he was writing all of this down. He had early feeding difficulties. He had uneven skills. He could do many things well. There were things he couldn't do well. Socioeconomic support matters. And also a supportive environment matters. He had a supportive community. When persons went to visit him in forest, everybody in the town would come to make sure he was okay and that nobody was taking advantage of him. He lived in a community that really, really supported him. But separate and apart from that, one can see how he thrived once he got to school. BJ showed that how these severe behaviors can disrupt normal social life. Mom had to leave her job. This child can't go to school. And also that other conditions coexist with ASD because this child also has a significant metabolic disorder. LA showed that higher IQs are often diagnosed later, that comorbidities may be more obvious first because his ADHD and his anxiety were observed long before the other features of ASD that he had, his social inadequacy. And the fine motor impairment, that's a key feature often in kids with higher IQs. So I wanted to flip over now to the sex differences. So why are girls underdiagnosed? Because that's exactly what's happening right now. Everybody's talking about girls with autism right now. And there are a few reasons. Parents, teachers, and physicians are less likely to look for ASD in girls because everybody expects it to be more common in boys as it is, as our current knowledge of it is. And of course, gender stereotyping may lead to symptoms in girls being less likely to be identified as ASD. Many people think girls are naturally quieter and are more content to play alone than boys. So when girls exhibit these behaviors, it's less likely to seem extreme. Symptoms that are quite prominent are more common in boys. So the impulse control problems and the repetitive behaviors are definitely more common in boys. And because of the male predominance in the early years, all the screening and diagnostic tests for ASD were designed from primarily male samples. Girls, in terms of their behavior, I mentioned this before, girls display more female and more acceptable gender typical narrow interests. So whereas boys may go at numbers and vehicles and facts and technology, girls may go to stickers and pens. And so the kinds of interests that they have may seem more typical than some of the interests that some of the boys have. Girls have higher visual attention, and their visual attention is similar to typically developing girls, and their social attention is similar to typically developing boys. So they don't seem to be that far off. They have better linguistic abilities. They tell richer stories. They use more descriptive language. They have less disfluency, and they're able to speak about their emotions more. They have a high motivation for friendships. They desire friendships. They think they're important, but friendships exhaust them. They think friendships are very hard work. The boys are often rejected because they're weird. Girls are more overlooked in friendships, and they're better able to camouflage their behaviors than boys. However, there's an important point at which girls become more noticeable. When girls are younger, they show better adaptive functioning than boys, so they fit in better. But as their social difficulties increase, as their age increases and they're put under more and more social pressures, they deteriorate more rapidly than the boys. And round about adolescence, their challenges with socialization become much more marked. So the referral for autism assessments drops to 2-to-1 in teenage and adulthood years from the childhood ratio of 5.5 to 1. I mentioned the tests because they have less restrictive, repetitive, and stereotype behaviors, which is one whole section of the autism assessments, the ADAS and the ADIR. They don't score very highly on those, and therefore their overall score may be lower. They tend to have more sensory problems, though, and more self-injurious and compulsive behaviors. They're more likely to be able to engage in reciprocal conversations and show interest, and better at integrating the nonverbal and the verbal behaviors together. But they're just like boys in terms of trying to understand others' nonverbal behaviors, so they don't understand the cues well. They show better imagination to initiate friendships, so they will try to make friends, but they will have a hard time keeping them. And they don't do as much stereotypy with objects as boys do. Their focus on specific topics, unicorns, world literature, seem reasonably okay to others. They often have anxiety at changes of routine. You saw this in one of the examples that I presented, one of the case studies, somatization and vomiting at the start of every academic year. They can be true perfectionists, and they may engage in fantasy toys longer than expected. However, they easily apologize when they make a social error. They can pick up on those cues. They often depend on others to speak in public situations, and this is not so their peers will tell everybody that they're shy, and so they'll stay in a group and somebody will often speak for them, and they will often mimic what somebody else says rather than provide spontaneous answers. However, some of these girls have an exceptional vocabulary, but they still struggle with the body language and the nonverbal communication, and they often have an unusual tone and inflection. I mentioned that they are considered shy by their peers as well. Only have 1 or 2 close friends, if at all. They try not to stand out in the group. However, they often do, because they often have unusual clothing, hair, and style choices. They're uncomfortable with excessive conversation. They tend to have more of the hypersensitivities. Some may have low frustration tolerance at school, and then others can keep a lid on it at school, but they wait till they go home and they have an explosive situation at home. So here's a quick case study of one of my girls. So she had delayed phrases at 18 months. At preschool at 2 years, because of the delayed phrases, she was sent to preschool. And at 2 years, that led to sentence use within 2 to 3 months. She had caught up. Her teacher said her coloring skills were poor. Here's the fine motor problems emerging again. And they persisted till she transitioned to grade 1. At grade 1, she was hyperexcitable, but she also often zoned out in class. Her work was often incomplete. She had social interaction problems. She had difficulty making friends. At 7 years, slow handwriting was identified again, and ADHD symptoms. At grades 3 to 4, whenever she did work, it was good work, but she only ever did a half of it. At 9 years, she decided she didn't want to go to school. She was teased, and there was a game that centered around not touching her. The teachers said that they had never observed anybody teasing her, but the guidance counselor did a class intervention anyway. She was referred for developmental and behavioral consultation, and the other symptoms of ASD were identified. She's currently thriving. She has lots of friends in a specialized but an age-appropriate high school system. So I wanted to quickly talk about what happens when kids get older. So I'm going to just touch on a few conditions, both medical conditions and mental health conditions. The pink bar shows the kids with autism. This was a case control study. So they had 4 to 5 kids without autism in comparison with for every kid with autism. And they followed them from 14 years to 22 years. This is a fascinating study because most of these studies have been cross-sectional, but this was published last year and it's a longitudinal study. And what you can see is that kids with autism, as they age, get more and more obese. You also see that in terms of the dyslipidemias, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, you see that happens as well, kids with autism as they get older, particularly after the age of 20 years. And but interestingly, they do not have a significantly higher cardiovascular disease risk. Sleep apnea, they're going to struggle with sleep. And you see that as they age, sleep becomes a problem. And the dysomnia, both hypersomnia and insomnia, which make up the dysomnias, you can see that they have that worsens as they get older. The dyslipidemias can be caused by a number of things coming together. We know that kids with autism often have a poor diet. They often have limited exercise. They often have sleep impairment, and they may be on psychotropic medication, all of which helps to increase their likelihood of having dyslipidemias. Just to mention the mental health problems, neurological disease increases as they get older as well. You can see that neurologic disease increases for kids without autism as well, but the level is higher. And you can see that seizures really take off, as the kids get older. The pooled epilepsy prevalence is 10% for kids with autism. The childhood prevalence is 7%, and the adult prevalence is 19%. Epilepsy is more common in adolescents and adults, in females, and in those with intellectual disability. So let's just mention quickly the mental health conditions. Anxiety you heard in the case presentations about anxiety presenting in different ways. And anxiety is really a big deal for kids with autism. When they're younger, it presents as unusual fears. But when they get older, they can have a whole range of anxiety problems. And you also see the high prevalence of ADHD as compared to kids without autism. There's also a high prevalence of depression, increasing with increasing age. So at all ages, autistic youth exhibited a higher prevalence of obesity, epilepsy, seizures, sleep apnea, dysomnia, anxiety, and depression among both males and females. While autistic youth exhibited higher prevalence of neurological disease only among males when they were analyzed by sex. At 14 years, obesity and ADHD were more prevalent among males with ASD than females. By age 22, all conditions were more prevalent among females. And so this is why it's so important for us to have our eyes out looking for the girls, because they're going to have more problems later on in life. So let's look at this is how they did the prevalence. So from 14 to the group 14 to 22 years, we see obesity moving from 13 to 33%, ADHD from 8% to almost 25%, neurological disorders from 7.3 to 33%, and anxiety disorders from 7% to 26%. So we're talking about really huge increases. Other conditions that we see in youth and adults with ASD are immune disorders, gastrointestinal disorders, a high risk of diabetes, bipolar disorder, OCD, schizophrenia, and suicide attempts. Those are my references, and I thank you all for listening to me on this World Autism Awareness Day.
Well, Prof, that was excellent. Thank you. That was really good. Really, really good. It seems as though each time this discussion is had, the information becomes more interesting, and the way in which you've been able to weave it together, tying in all of these later comorbidities, and especially how you're able to share with us the progression from the younger to the older individual, and again discussing the comorbidities really brought things home. And I'm sure we're going to have more and more questions as we go along. Some of the questions have been answered as you presented live, but then we'll have some questions towards the end. So on behalf of everyone, I can safely say that was brilliant. Thanks so much. So we'll have some questions for you in a short time. So in the interest of time, we're going to press along to our second presenter. Our second presenter is none other than Dr. Andrea Garbut. She is a friend and colleague, but actually my senior in the program. So she trained undergrad at the University of the West Indies, also trained in the Department of Pediatrics for her postgrad at University Hospital of the West Indies, and then went away to Canada to study developmental and behavioral pediatrics. She's come back to join the department, and with Prof had run our child and family department. And now, again, her greatest achievement is being the mother of Gabby. And we all know who Gabby is, right? So this evening, Dr. Garbut will present for us. So I have autism. What now? With no further ado, Dr. Garbut, take it away. It's all yours.
So good evening, everybody. Thanks to the coordinators for inviting me to present. It's World Autism Day. I'd like to say that as much as how we remember on April 2, one of the biggest impact that we would like to have is for everyone to remember autism throughout and not just at this point in time. Ask me as to why my slides are all over the place. I cannot tell you that, but let's go again. Let's see. There we go. So I hope everybody's seeing the correct screen.
No, we're
No.
seeing your presenter view.
My presenter screen. Okay, let's see if we can. Okay, you can do it then.
Yeah, let me just try and switch it here.
There's a reason not to play with the computer before presentation, eh?
There you go.
Okay. So autism, you have been diagnosed with autism, or autism is diagnosed. So what is next? I think that's a heavy-handed question to ask anybody, and to give it a response in 45 minutes is not quite an easy match. However, as Prof. Sam said, the prevalence rate of autism has definitely increased globally. And with that, when you can look at the graph right there, you can see it increasing along. I will nicely say I did not know when it was 1 in 1,000. I knew much later on. The last CDC report actually was March of last year, and that looked back at the birth year of 2012, where 8-year-olds were looked at. And what we have realized is prevalence has increased. We're now at 1 in 36. If we were to go back and look at the Jamaican context now, and we looked at the number of live births for that year, we know that there's just under 40,000 kids. And if we were to kind of play with the figures and bring it back to our setting and see how many kids that would be, we're looking at just over 1,000 kids for that year alone that somehow would have autism, whether it's mild, moderate, severe, a little bit of the features, phenotypic versus diagnosed. We're looking at just over 1,000 kids. Way back in the day, I like to say that when I just came back, I wanted to know, did we identify all? Did we find all? And then gradually I've mellowed out, and the question really is really what happens after a diagnosis, and recognizing how important the what after really becomes, and not just for diagnosing, but what happens to those kids, to those families, the extended families and schools that those kids remain in. So after the diagnosis, we must be cognizant of something, that there is an emotional impact on parents. There's an emotional impact on the families. The impact on the families affect how families perceive themselves. They're not quite the same. That of their child is no longer a neurotypical kid. Also, their support system. So friends may no longer be friends. Friends may not be able to run in the same circles, do the same things that they once used to do. And so they kind of lose those friends, but not to fear, there'll be new friends. And also family coherence and adaptation, and eventually quality of life. And we must recognize and understand that if we don't touch on the realm of parental experiences and their coping post-diagnosis, we will never be able to fully support and help families to improve their quality of life. So I look back at a few studies, and I just kind of combined all the words that parents said, almost like a word cloud. Parents said after they got a diagnosis. Some had sadness, some had grief, some said that they felt helpless, overwhelmed at that point. Others were devastated, others weren't either sad or devastated, they were just angry, point blank angry. Some felt guilty, felt it was their fault for doing or not doing something, and they could not necessarily figure out exactly what it was. Some were relieved, and they said that helped, and some were in utter shock. So despite all the features being present, they still were shocked. However, as they moved along, there were parents who stated that they became more accepting of behaviors. A diagnosis finally concretized what they were experiencing, and it helped them to stop the self-blame, especially when they got information, and it gave them a better understanding to their children. Now, if we look at these words, what we can recognize is that basically they're going through what we would call grief. What we would call grief. Here you have parents who were in denial, those who were angry. I didn't quite find quite the ones with bargaining, But I'm sure they are, because I have a few parents. I said, you know, if I only did this, or if I only do this, will this be taken away from me? Being overwhelmed, the helplessness, and then the acceptance when parents said that, it made it a little better for them to know that there was something there. We as practitioners now need to be responsive to where the parents are along this journey. Because I like to say a diagnosis of autism is really a journey. It starts at one point when you start having those concerns, you meet a physician, you meet a therapist along the way. And it may never be such a great idea to meet everybody one go, because it might be a collision, but definitely the journey is where we're going to go. And we need to recognize that, find parents where they are, so that we are balanced in giving information, in trying to give outcomes, in trying to state that things may not be always quite how you expected them, but there's a different road that can be traveled. I'll just touch on quality of life before we move on from here. Besides emotional turmoil, remember, this is the other aspect that we will look at. And we know from studies that physical, psychological, social health, and spirituality in parents who have kids with autism is lower than in parents who don't. The strongest risk factor for parental quality of life, you can guess it easily, severity of the diagnosis of ASD. Severity now may vary. We may look at severity objectively, yet a parent who may have very high expectations to even hear the word mild, this may be a significant fall from where they expect it to be. Protective factors for parental quality of life, however, is really parental education level. And you can look at that as probably the ability to go on, get more intervention, have more support, a better understanding, and definitely levels of severity of ASD in the child. So now if it's not that severe, you or kids may have less features, then you could see parents not completely unstressed, but not as stressed. When we meet these parents at diagnosis, remember that some of these changes have already occurred. Physical quality of life, remember exhaustion. The sleep disturbances in kids is not funny. They fall asleep at 8 o'clock, they wake up at 1 o'clock, they go back to sleep at 3 o'clock, they're back up again at 5 o'clock. We all know that past a certain age, we can barely manage with so many disturbances. So parents are exhausted. And let's not forget the energy level that may come with the child. The psychological parts that comes with it, worry of what is to happen with my child. Most parents, one of the things that they wish for is for their children to grow up, to live productive lives, but to really be self-supportive in themselves. So if you start imagining all that can go wrong, and then you start reckoning, okay, what will happen to my child? That alone can become mentally exhausting. Social health might be affected. So your friends are carrying their kids to the birthday party or the movies, and these are friends you had from ever since, and you have kids of similar age. But you will not go, or you may not go, or choose not to go, simply because you know that the noise may become a problem, the screaming may be a problem, the popping of the balloon, and a kid may just not sit still to watch a movie. So again, we start pulling away. And spirituality, the question becomes, why me? And also not being able to go and attend with other worshipers simply because, again, crowding, noise, the ambience may not be as conducive for your child as with typical kids. So we must find a balance when we start that diagnostic journey with our patients. We must be empathetic, we must be compassionate, we must be informative, and we must find positives. It can't be all loss of hope. We must be able to find positives in our children, and there's so many in kids. And when you look at positives, you're not looking at somebody who may be completely verbal, but that you may do one aspect of communication is still a positive, because it's still better than doing absolutely nothing. And in giving that information, being positive, we must also try not to overwhelm. So yes, we would like to tell them to go to all different 6 places that they must go immediately and call immediately. But remember, parents are not focusing completely on what they just heard the word autism. Yes, it may have been said before, but it's now being said by you, and they would have lost focus. So balance, as I said, is a principle of art. We must learn how to practice. Parents often want guidance, even on that visit. what they want to do. Will my child have a normal life? Will my child go to a regular school? What help can I find for my child? Are there affordable places? That's a common question. How can I get him to sleep? How can I get him to eat? How can I get him to... All of that may be what ends up overwhelming a parent. All the questions, can document them, and we can start them off having a few at a time and gradually going through the process. But remember the balance. So one of the first things we really want to tell our parents is getting an early diagnosis. So when I say an early diagnosis, early is all relative, but we like it for it to be in the early childhood period. And diagnosis here, where we don't have managed health care, means that you yourself, when the concern pops up, you can, as a parent, you can encourage, practitioners can encourage parents to go and seek and look for that help. And the reason why we want early intervention is because we want to target the core symptoms of autism: social communication impairment, the language issues, and behavioral challenges. The basis of early intervention is that we're working with neuroplasticity. So the brain's ability, which is the brain's ability to reorganize and form new neural connections. This occurs especially in the early childhood period, and we're looking at 2 to 3, we expand all the way up to 5, and it goes up a little bit higher. But the older we get, the slower this happens. And we know that exposure to various learning experiences can modify and strengthen neural connections. So if you have different experiences, the architecture within the brain can change. If you're not doing certain things, then that pathway becomes prone. But if you're doing it more, then you say that the pathway becomes more developed. So plasticity allows the brain to adapt and reorganize in response, in my case, therapeutic interventions. Constantly stimulating the brain through appropriate interventions can then help to shape neural pathways that we want, and so improve both behavioral and cognitive functioning in children with autism. So we want parents to be aware, we want them to seek help and be guided by us as practitioners or as friends or lay fellows that there is the need for early intervention and the reason why. So you know that story that goes, oh, but daddy spoke late? My answer to this, daddy has already defined himself. This child hasn't, so let's not wait and watch. That's what 2 things that we don't do anymore. We can watch, but we're going to watch and work at the same time. When you get an early diagnosis, you also allow families to seek out other support. So looking at educational resources, and was a lot of community-based programs. You look at, for example, parent support groups, so that they can support themselves better, they can find better coping mechanisms. And in doing all of this, really, what you really are trying to do is to reduce parental stress, and you're trying to make the parents become empowered to feel as though there's some control in what they can do for their child. When we look at interventions now, the goal of intervention, definitely to minimize core deficits. We really want functional independence, and we want to eliminate or minimize, prevent behaviors, for example, that do interfere with functional skills. So one such behavior, if I prefer to flick the pencil or the crayon back and forth instead of writing with it, I have a little problem because I will never get to the writing because I'm there stimming with the crayon. So intervention really is trying to make children functionally more present in where they are, having better adaptive skills, some better academic skills, but they're making them functional in their settings. Interventions are usually individualized. No 2 children are the same. Maybe the methodology you use might be the same, but remember, the same starting point may not be for 2 kids. Remember that the disorder is on a spectrum. Your interventions that you seek must be developmentally appropriate, so it must match the developmental level of a child. For example, you're not going to teach a child language who can't speak by reading a full storybook and word for word. It's just too long, it's too much, it's overwhelming. And so it varies depending on whether you may have a kid who's nonverbal versus a verbal child. The other part of it that parents need to recognize that it's intensive, with performance data relative to treatment goals to evaluate and adjust intervention. Remember what I said? It's intensive. You don't pay a therapist for an hour or 2 hour session once a week, go home, and then nothing. Whatever is learned, you must ask, what is your homework? What homework did you get? So that you can practice and implement at home. Note that all intervention should be based on sound theoretical constructs, rigorous methodologies, and objective scientific evidence of effectiveness. Now, this doesn't mean that you're not going to be open to listen to parents who may ask questions. And though you may think as a practitioner that some questions are silly, you need to recognize the question, validate it with a response, and always make a parent feel willing to, free to ask a question. I think one of the oddest one I've gotten is whether or not detoxification could work. And I had to ask, you mean like putting your foot in the basin of water with, and they told me yes, but I really did not think that that would ever come up as a suggestion, but it does. And parents are out there looking for just about anything. So just remember, you yourself as a practitioner need to know which ones have sound evidence behind it, which ones aren't harmful, and definitely which ones are harmful. And you're going to say, you know what, maybe we should clear away from those. The approaches, you can get educational practices, especially for the older kids who are in school, developmental therapies, and you can use the behavioral interventions. Younger kids, you tend to be more developmental and behavioral, and as they get older, it goes into the educational practices. The scope can be very focused, for example, on one skill, like learning to write, versus something comprehensive when you're doing learning to communicate in general, as well as have a conversation. So scope, approaches differ, scope differs. The settings can also differ. You can be in a therapist's office, one-to-one. And as I said, you can do 1 hour or 2 hours. Just remember the child's attention span is not for that length of time. So there will be breaks in between. So it's not a full hour or 2 hours. And it can also be within the classroom, or it might be at home. So home tends to be the more naturalistic parts. Classroom tends to be a little bit, if it's within a developmentally appropriate area, but definitely in a therapist's office tends to be the more structured adult-led versions of intervention. I've chosen one main type of intervention because we all know ABA, and everybody gets referred to ABA. We have very few behavior therapists. So ABA is really a scientific approach to understanding behavior. You're going to use principles of learning, behavioral strategies, and environmental modifications to improve or teach new behaviors. Now, these aren't naughty behaviors. I always have to tell parents, it's not because your kid is naughty, we're sending them to ABA therapy, but we want them to learn behaviors. And these behaviors are skills and actions needed to talk, play, live, adaptive functions right there where you are. That's what we're looking at. So you focus on how behaviors can change, how they're affected by the environment, as well as how learning can take place. And you're going to use these to try to implement changes in your child. The ultimate goal is the same as the ultimate goal for interventions in general. You're going to improve social communication skills, improve daily living skills in older kids, definitely looking at academics because you're trying to enhance independence and the quality of life for an individual. It's very applicable. So you're not going to look for way out skills or something that's a mile away from what a kid is expected to do. It could be something as simple as attending, paying attention to what is going on, or greeting, good morning, mommy, hello, something like that. It can be a new skill, for example, learning to use a spoon. And it can also use it to help to generalize or transfer behavior from one situation or response to another. A clear one is seatedness. Imagine a kid learning how to be seated in a therapist's office, but that isn't generalized to a school. So you can use ABA to help you with these, as well as you can use it to reduce challenging or interfering behaviors. Now, the behavior, we can classify those differently as well. Behaviors you want to maintain over time, learning to brush your teeth. Behaviors that should be increased. Communication is one of those behaviors, and behaviors that need to be decreased. And I gave you the example of the stimming, but also the tantrums. Those are behaviors that we can look at. Now, you have the behavior that you want. You need to know the methods of how to change the behavior to what you want, to then determine if your intervention has been successful versus unsuccessful. And so there must be collection of information, an objective way to say, has your intervention worked? I say this to say that once you engage with an ABA therapist, a parent should be able to come back to you as a practitioner with their goal sheet. the plan must have specific intervention goals. It must be objective. It has a well-defined plan. It has the strategies used to meet the goals, and it should have ongoing data collection to show whether or not the intervention has changed. In many of the kids, you will see it clearly documented, percentage of times that they can see it, or you see somebody with little stick figures counting off and say, okay, how many times have they responded to name over the course of this day? The amount of times I said it, the amount of times I responded. How did I get them to respond? Did I have to go in front of them for them to respond? Could I call from a distance? So clearly written plans should be there, and parents should request that these things are given to them, shown to them, and there should be time for appropriate feedback. As I said, the interventions vary from highly structured interventions in natural environments. And so it can be with a therapist directly, it can be child-led in the context of play, daily routines, and it really is altered based on what developmental skill set the child has. That behavioral clinician or ABA therapist works with the family and child to determine which skills to target for development and maintenance and what goals are appropriate. There must be consistency in the sense that you can't do this on and off. You can't do it only in the office. It must be consistently done. And though implementation may vary, the goals should be set with clear outcomes. And that implementation can be directly one-to-one with a therapist, with a registered behavior technician, or as well, it can also be parent-centered. When we look at ABA outcomes now, there are a few randomized control studies that show that it does work. Notice I don't put hours in here, but I'll tell you the hours. It says children younger than 12 receiving more hours per week of ABA were more likely to achieve goals of their program. And it also says that more intensive therapy associated with achieving optimal developmental outcomes. When you look at research studies, they're talking about 40 to 60 hours per week of therapy, which then means we have to try and figure out how do we get therapy in the classroom or in the home, or at least 8 hours per day. And then you realize parents need to learn some skills. However, they've looked at outcomes for even 20 hours, and we do know that even with that, that is a third of what we start out for the recommendations, you can still have good outcomes. Now, I put the map of Jamaica here, not to remind me which parish I'm in, but to show you where I can remember, we have ABA therapists. Kingston and St. Andrew, they shine as usual. St. Anne has one person. St. James has a satellite clinic on that side. And I've left the one in the Caribbean Sea because there is someone who works virtually but does face-to-face visit and works with a registered behavior therapist. Now, remember what I said. If we look back as to when as to how many children we would have had in that same year as the US studies, we're talking about 1,000 children. Recognize the limitations we have here immediately when we look at the amount of therapists that we have. So we go on and we say, okay, here are some of the services. These are the places you can access. However, know that there are going to be waiting lists and there are going to be probably a good cost associated with all. However, we do encourage our parents, once they're able to afford it, to be able to invest in therapy. Remember what I said, in therapy that has shown scientific value. So we still have another pathway to go. ABA is just about one route. We also have speech and language services to contend with. So speech and language pathologists really assess and treat communication disorders. And for kids with autism, the most frequent presentation is that of language. So of course, many of them even show up to a speech and language therapist before. And so the speech and language pathologist becomes part of that team, which is involved in addressing the needs of children with either diagnosed or suspected autism. They support communication, and this might be through development of language skills, whether they're using augmentative and alternative communication needs, whether it's by speech or articulation, play, social communication. And in some other places, I know here it's limited as though for also feeding and swallowing issues. I found one study that was actually a Canadian perspective that interviewed speech and language pathologists in Ontario. On average, they were doing approximately 11 assessments per month for any, and these were assessments for anything that had communication concerns. On average, just below 40% of those children had been diagnosed or had suspected autism. So you can see that at least that percentage makes up their population of clients. Their assessment methods, some were observation, some were parent interviews, combination of informally asking questions of or directing the child, and many had informal assessments. When you think about how children may present, then you can recognize that standardized testing may not always be the most appropriate in some kids, and sometimes observation and parent interviews are used. When you look at how they deliver therapy to their children, they spend quite a bit of time on caregiver training, both individual and group support. They looked at support staff training. So now speech and language pathologists are in schools in Canada, so they were training the SLPs within the school to help the schools to manage children. There was also peer coaching. This one was interesting, where they were coaching other kids within a class how to help their peers. And then there were individualized coaching with and without parental observation. So research really offers more support for speech and language pathologists, interventions for children who are nonverbal. There's both adult prompting is also incorporated, and they may do it both in a intervention may be delivered both in a naturalistic setting and well as with caregiver involvement. And you really need, what they're looking for is to reinforce the initiation of communication and the functional use of songs, gestures, and words. I would be remiss if I did not talk about augmentative and alternative communication. So some parents will say, I don't want to teach my child to use a sign language because that will prevent them from speaking. The answer is no. What augmentative and alternative communication does is to help promote social interaction. So if I already have issues making eye contact, maybe being in physical close range of somebody else, and I want to play, even if I can sign, say a few words or a few utterances, it helps with communication. If I can start having any scenario that helps that with communication, then it becomes a learning opportunity. So really, what you want is to give children tools to help them promote their social interaction and understand the purpose of communication. So if they understand it, then they'll be more likely to do it. And if they're more likely to do it, then you're going to increase communication. It does not delay speech, but it may enhance the emergence of spoken words by pairing nonverbal with verbal skills. And examples of these are really sign language as well as a picture exchange system that is used in Jamaica. So come back to our Jamaican context. Do we offer caregiving training, both individual and group? Not sure about the group, but definitely individually. Support staff training, definitely. I'm not defining it as teachers, however, but I'm going to look at it as probably shadows that can be taught as well. And there's definitely individualized intervention with and without parent observation. Many of my parents tell me that they're not allowed into the room. Most of the time it's because of the behaviors that occur, not because they want to shut out parents. And I always say to them, well, please remember to ask what is your homework that you're supposed to do at home so that you can go home and implement. And parents must always be encouraged to do that. Come back to our beautiful little map again. And then I'm putting here and I look, okay. I think I have most of the speech therapists that are registered. There might be one or two that aren't registered, but I've stuck to that one here in our map. And again, you can see the limitation of services. So if there's anybody who wants to become a speech therapist and would like to land in one of these places, just notice the entire belt at the bottom that has no services. So remember what the map looks for ABA therapy. Remember what the map looks in this context. Here's the name and contact information for a few speech therapists that we have in the island. And most of you will know that there's a long list, a long waiting list. Some interventionists are able to only offer the assessment, not necessarily individualized delivery. I will say that there has been more and more the opening of group or parent focus delivery methods, and we can see those advertised on Instagram these days, and we encourage parents. The way I've pitched it to the parents is that, you take the child to the therapist for half an hour if their attention span lasts that much. But remember, you at home actually doing these things is much more than half an hour each day. You can have pockets of half an hour throughout the day or on the weekend. And so it is value. It just means that parents need to make the decision that they are going to become actively involved. So we move on and we'll see other services that we have. This one, most people may know, General Developmental Services, which is based on our early simulation program. It was established in 1975, before some people were born, and it is the only public early intervention program which is given through the Department of Ministry of Labor and Social Security. It provides services to children in the early childhood period. They're looking at 0 to 6 years, and it's really either center-based, community-based, or it's school-based. The center base, everybody should know, 95 Hanover Street, and they do some assessment, they do monitoring services, and physiotherapy is definitely offered. All children are provided an initial assessment. Based on that assessment, they've developed intervention techniques, which then are delivered either at the center or at the community or at the school. So we rolled into the community-based interventions, and we'll notice that these interventionists, and I mean how it was planned to be, they would make visits to homes and to nurseries and to schools, and they really wanted to do it at least once a month. But that 1,000 children, just think about it, and that's just for 1 year. So we know it's not as frequent as we would like, but the aim of it was not necessarily for the frequency of their visit, but to teach those around them, very much like teaching our parents, what to do with the children so that they could stimulate them. Remember that PT services are also offered. School-based programs, I think the school was opened in about 2006, and it offers preschool education for children with disabilities. ESB is the largest single provider of both community-based and school-based services, and it has expanded since its inception. It used to be only in Kingston and St. Andrew. Now there are satellite clinics, for example, in Montego Bay and Portland. I don't think I've ever been to Orange Bay, or may have passed Orange Bay, but whoever lives in Orange Bay goes to that unit almost every single day. From 2016, a report that was noted that over a 4-year period, they had moved from 400 kids to 1,420 kids by that 6-year period. And the STEM Plus school, as I said, that was started in 2006, additional children were being seen. Approximately 115 were enrolled at that point in time. Now we know we'd say it's 0 to 6. We know that STEM Plus has been very good to us. And sometimes without having a place to place the children may actually stay there a little bit longer. So look at generalized services. I've included St. Thomas in this list because I do think that I could not get the confirmation, but I do think that that the interventionists do go to St. Thomas. And when you look at it, these are the places that they offer services to. So combined services, I try to start putting a map together. You'll see the very dense area of Kingston and St. Andrew. Yes, it has the greatest population-wise. However, it still means that there's lack of services within the other areas. I'll mention just a quick brief thing on occupational therapy. It is one of the other forms of therapy that we do recognize, and we refer children fine motor skills, as Prof had mentioned in many. Some of them, it might be writing for those who have reached that level. For others, it might be something more functional, maybe as buttoning, eating, using a spoon. So they really provide strategies and programs which can be practiced at home and at school with the goal of increasing your functional independence. Again, these tend to be very much Kingston-based services. School has another form or where we refer our patients. Just remember that autism does not indicate intellectual disability. And I feel as though I have to say this statement very often. And sometimes we have to ask for certain assessments, not because we think that the kids can't do the work, but because we need to prove that they can do the work and they deserve the right to remain in a specific type of setting. What we are aiming for is inclusion. We want to be included in a regular setting because we know that there are studies that show that social skills definitely improve once you place children in that type of learning environment. However, we recognize as well that there might be some hindrances that prevent our kids from being included in a typical school. Behavior and adaptive characteristics, just remember that behaviors can be disruptive, and if it's disrupting a class, then you're impacting many other learners, and it's not just one person. When we looked at some studies, majority, and the Swedish ones had tended to stick out, that teachers had positive attitudes of kids with autism being in their classroom, and this didn't depend on whether they had special education training or not. The benefits, as I said, there's definitely increased development of social interaction in both communication skills and group activities, but there's also acceptance. Neurotypical kids learn what a disability is, they learn how to assist, they become more accepting, and it helps to decrease stigmatization. School, I'll separate them below 6 and above 6. Below 6, we tend to like the traditional schools. The preference really is for inclusion. We want small classroom. We don't want a classroom that comes with number grades and what all you must be doing, but learning to share, participating, turn taking, those sorts of things. So focus on socialization and play, not some of the fascinations like the letters, the numbers, the colors. Yes, those just happen to occur as well, but we don't want that type of focus. There are a few special education units that exist for below 6. I think Macam, STEM+, SAB, All Inclusive, and Bel Air Prep, from what I can recall, actually had or practice inclusion, and so the kids could participate within those settings. When we look at above 6, we have other factors which help to determine placement. Here for us is really looking at the psychoeducational assessment or the developmental assessment, depending on the age it was done. And we're looking at kids who tend to fall far from what would be expected, at least 2 standard deviations are wearing their scores. Those would be kids who would now be eligible for special education. We still like the practice of inclusion, however. So if your school does not practice inclusion, even if you may not be able to be placed in one of those schools. And also remember that behaviors, and I tell parents this often, that behaviors can get you kicked out of school greater than just having a diagnosis of autism. So we need to help our children to cope and to face and to have behaviors that are not maladaptive. The school list is not exhaustive and could never be, but remember the public setting has a School of Hope units. The private setting, there are a few schools which are around that you can look into. It is always a mad rush at this time of the year because children are now being registered for school and need to have their reports or whatever to be able to say which school they'll be able to enter. Schools like Liberty Prep definitely has waiting lists. PAJ Prep tends to be a typical school, but it does accept children who are on the spectrum or children with developmental disabilities. And Providence, I think, is one of the new ones that has been relocated out in Old Harbor. So it's just a short list for you to look at. So now, besides schools, I didn't put any markers for where the schools are, but I'll put in for services, and just to note that at this point, this is where we are. Most services being located in Kingston and St. Andrew. We'll look at the gray stars, but we'll look at that a little bit later. So we're moving on, just to remember that autism is not a solo act. So it doesn't come by itself and it doesn't function by itself. So there are coexisting conditions that we must be able to manage and treat. And whether those are sleep, ADHD, epilepsy, anxiety, constipation, or GI symptoms, those things can impact quality of life. And so we must aim to help parents to manage these different comorbidities. Autism is also not a solo act in that it says that there needs to be a multidisciplinary approach. Very expensive, by the way, but there needs to be a multidisciplinary approach. We must also think about having the traditional therapists, and we must also empower parents now to participate in helping to manage their children. Parent-mediated intervention, there is evidence for increasing usefulness. And evidence is coming not necessarily from North American countries or European countries, but you're looking at countries like India and Africa, where, again, shortages of resources have forced people to look at different ways of providing services. So you can call it parent management training, but it really should still be built on scientific principles. For example, going right back to ABA approaches, where you're looking at maybe focus parts, looking to increase joint attention, to improve compliance, learning to attend, reducing maladaptive behaviors. We're not going to overwhelm parents, but we start with one task at a time to see how best we can improve quality of life. Sleep is an easy one to look at. I've chosen two only for this presentation, sleep being one. Remember that behavioral sleep disorders are the most common sleep problems in a child, whether they're ASD or not. So you get things like bedtime resistance. I don't want to go to bed, can't fall asleep, the insomnia, the parasomnias, as well as delayed sleep phase disorders. Children with autism now, they're more likely than neurotypical kids to experience sleep disorders, 50 to 80% compared with about 40% of children with ASD. They don't have it more often only, but they tend to have it more severe. And sleep disorders are equal whether or not you have mild, moderate, or severe intellectual disabilities. So it's common across all cognitive levels and occur from childhood through to adolescence. Now, why do we want to manage sleep problems? One big one, it places an additional burden on families and increases parental stress, so their quality of life. And it impacts behavior, socialization, and learning. But we require that parents know what is expected, know how to implement to reach what is expected if we're ever going to ensure that the sleep needs are met, especially in nonverbal kids. So we're going to talk a little bit about sleep hygiene. And we're going to look at elements of sleep routines, something basic and simple. There must be a bedtime, transition time, suitable environment, and there must be consistency. Now, bedtime. This must be consistent, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, or Wednesday in the day, whether it's summer holidays, Easter holidays, or a school day, or whether even if you're staying at home, there must be a set bedtime for your child. And it is based on a child's need and not the parental schedules. So if you know that you're going to work till 8 o'clock, please make sure somebody else is there to carry out the routine. The routines being carried out by different individuals, they do not have to be the same, but they must be similar in trying to achieve the same goal. So the way mommy puts a child to sleep can be a little different than the way daddy puts a child to sleep, but we must get the job done in the right way. There must be a transition, and that transition clearly demarcates what is going to happen. Kids with autism, difficulty with transition. So you must prepare for the transition. We say we use things like timers, we use markers, clocks, we use time. And even if the kid doesn't know time, something like a timer that rings off and said, okay, it's time for your bedtime routine, that helps to mark the transition. And you're not just going to say it once. You're going to say soon time, 5 minutes to soon time, until you get to the point, now all done, and we make the transition. The transition is one from bustle to quiet, from bright to dim to dark. So we want to move kids from out of areas where activity is happening. I mean, 8 o'clock in the night, teenagers are still up, parents are still up. And so, but you need your kid to get settled. So we need to move them. You move them from out the living room, and you probably move them going to the bathroom, to their bedrooms. The lighting changes. Turn off the bright lights. Nothing interferes with melatonin like bright lights. Turn off the light and start to make that transition. As that transition occurs, we call it the wind down period. So remember, we're not trying to wind them up. So we're no bright lights, no screens, no blue lights. Avoid excessive noise, vigorous activities. You're looking for quieter activities. So 10 little monkeys jumping on the bed doesn't quite work, but lullaby and good night might be a better transition to play during that wind down period. You must have a routine. We don't wing anything. We make sure we plan it out. You're going to have your bath, the towel, the clothes, and everything is already put out. We're going to have a bath. We're going to brush teeth. If you're not brushing, wash them out. They're going to do a story. After the story, we may do massaging, we may look at pictures, we may have quiet songs, prayer, make sure to have the presence of a favorite toy. But once we've gotten down into that routine, the point is for the kid, for you to say good night. Your good night may result with you sitting on a chair and then gradually moving the chair to the door, or sitting up, saying good night, walking out and returning the child back to the bed whenever they feel like getting out. It then means that even in that bedroom, one, we don't use it for punishment, and we need to make sure that it's clutter-free. It's nice to have a whole heap of things in there, but it also causes a distraction. So we need to make sure that the environment is okay for sleep or conducive to sleep. We want the children to fall asleep on their own with their favorite toy, but not with a bottle in the mouth, and that they fall asleep in that space independently. It sounds smooth. It doesn't work as easily. It's constant trial. And I often say to parents, don't try it until you are ready. So when you're tired and frustrated, may not be the best time to initiate it because your tolerance will be low and you'll do it for maybe one night. If you finish the one night, and you'll never try it again. The kid says, oh, okay. So now I know what to do when she tries this again. So be consistent, be ready for it, know that it's going to be challenging, but know that there are benefits to having good sleep. You're less likely to have a cranky child. You're likely to have a child who is alert, who can attend, and we know that learning occurs during the sleep as well, and having a good night rest makes someone more alert for learning the following day. It must be consistent so that you can establish your sleep-wake cycle. So you can't say I'm going to do it this week, disappear next week, or this week the kid lives with you, next week the kid lives with dad, and you and dad are not on the same road. You know it's going to be a challenge thereafter. But if both parents understand the reason why, then both parents are more likely to become consistent with it. When it doesn't work, or as you try to institute, there are pharmacological aids, and the most we'll ever start with is melatonin. So it can be used, but there must be a sleep routine in place before you even want to consider anything being administered. Okay, so sleep was one of the topics I said I would talk on, and I'm hoping I'm not going on too long. I think we'll go to the final aspect of it, is really teaching parents how to facilitate communication. So if you think about how children learn, you know that children pay attention. And if they're looking at you, they can learn, they can watch how your mouth moves, they can learn how to play with their mouths, how to read your facial expressions, read your gestures that occur, but they're learning because they're attentive to you. When you think about a kid with autism, your face may not be the thing that they want to look at. Rather, they may be spinning a wheel or looking at a string or a thread or looking at a tablet. And really what this does, this distraction, whatever it is, it prevents engagement and learning. So we need to know what holds our children's interests, and we need to participate in it so that it can be a learning situation. So the first thing we tend to tell our parents is find what interests your child, the spotlight in your child's life. So what does he like to hold in their hand? What makes a child smile? What makes a child calm? What activities does a child participate in? Look for those things and try to find one, not 10, just one to start with, right? And the rationale, as I said, if you have appealing activities or objects, it motivates kids to interact with their caregivers. Motivation supports active learners, which then shows initiative and spontaneity. If kids are motivated, then they're more likely to continue doing an activity. And the longer the activity that you can keep, the longer you can keep up this activity, the more time it creates for learning opportunities. So find what interests your child, and then you start stepping into your position. So if you're going to take an activity, you must try to be at least face-to-face. Be it on the floor or in a chair or on a bed when you're changing them, but you need to enter your child's world. You want them to see you eye to eye, face to face, look at the mouth, look at the expressions. Having a little table and chair is ideal, even a high chair, they can't escape, but even a high chair can be fun to use. Tables, you don't want something that they can get out of easily. So even when you look at therapy, you'll see the kids against a wall where they can't run away. And then you must be able to remember what it is that you are going to use, whether it's ball time, changing time, but find your position where you are going to be front and center to your child whilst they are going to engage with you in an activity that they like. Remember to eliminate the competition, and it simply means remove the distractions. If you're going to play around a table and, for example, they like their cars and they're going to run it back and forth with you, we don't need a dozen cars on the table. We need one, and we pack away the rest. We turn off the screens. We make sure we have a nice calm environment, and just remember to tell everybody else around the house as best as possible, give me a few minutes, at least give me the 15 minutes starting with it for me to engage. In the meantime, can I assign you another task to do? If it's not urgent, can you hold on? Or dad, can you take over the rest of the household? Auntie, grandma, take over the other side. Respect your child's comfort zone. Look for physical closeness. Pay attention to what makes your child comfortable. Usually we say stay at arm's length. You don't want them overwhelmed, and you surely don't want them to avert their gaze from you. So you want to keep them engaged, but you don't want to push too hard. And as I said, find time for the engagement. Whatever task you choose, please make sure not to interrupt the kid whenever they're doing it, right? Don't introduce new ideas. So if we're going to run the car, we don't need to fly the car. Keep it simple. Allow the child to see your presence, know and see your interest. So you must actively listen, just like how we are participating in a conversation. You smile, you nod, you make eye contact, you imitate, you even help. And gradually you start in terms of your comment. These can be simple, single words. And as engagement occurs and words develop, then over time you can narrate the entire scenario, but don't start narrating when we can barely get one word in. And finally in this, we are going to mix it up. So let's see if you've been listening. If we're going to review an activity, we're going to review an activity, and I will say to you that for the spotlight, we're going to roll the ball. What would be the next step in this activity? Anybody can answer. I will tell you, I can't see who's answering. Mr. Moderator, does anybody have control of the mic?
They can talk. They can raise their hands if they'd like to talk, or they can type in the chat.
Okay, can you just choose?
Michelle Henry says, "Get one ball."
Get one ball is definitely part of it. But what would be the next activity? If you're going to choose that we're going to roll the ball, we're going to get one ball, and after that, what we're going to do?
Roll the ball. Find a location.
You see, you guys weren't listening. You must
Roll
find your position. I will take that as find your location then. Where's your location supposed to be?
I got that right.
Yes, face to face so that you can see the kid. So you can do this on a high chair. Yes, you can do it on the floor, legs open, the kid in front of you between your legs, because we're not going to roll it too far for anybody to have to get up and move or anything like that. So find your position. What are you going to do after that? Somebody spoke about find one ball, but let's add to that. What's the next step?
Checking here in the chat. Checking in the chat. Checking in the chat.
The next step is that you must
remove
eliminate
any
your
distractions.
competition. Exactly. So the person who said one ball was definitely right. We don't need a dozen balls out there, but we need to move the screen away. We need to move away from other activities that might be occurring in the house. Something simple that's occurring, you know, when pots and pans are banging, you need to move away from that so that the kid can focus on you. And finally, what do you need to do? Find your comfort zone and follow the lead of your child. So those are activities that you can do. As you follow the lead of your child and your child rolls the ball to you, what you want is to roll back the ball. And remember I said simple words to start with. First word could be ball. Second word can be roll. Gradually increasing to rolling, to I am rolling the ball. You can even increase it to even give colors if that is what catches a child's attention, but it is a gradual move to help you to engage with your child. Other forms of facilitating communication is labeling. And I don't literally mean putting a label or a name of the object because the child can't read. So if you put fan and the child can't read, that doesn't help. But as you use each object in your day-to-day activities, call it by its name. Snacks is a word I hate. It has too many things under its umbrella. So it's a biscuit, it's a chip, it's a cookie, it's a juice. Give the things their proper name. Prompt for kids who have more language. In terms of I want, or if they have little less, you label it water and you wait a little bit. But if they have more language, then continue to build it up. For kids who have even more language than that, narrate as you go along. We are going to supermarket or open door. Open the door outside. So just be mindful of the child's developmental level when you're doing it. And all in all, you must constantly model whatever you're doing, even with other children, even with your partners, a simple hello every single morning, hello daddy, hello whatever, so that you can ensure that your kids are hearing these and it builds for communication skills. I think we're winding down, and the last thing I think I'm going to talk about is being able to take care of yourself. So think about caregivers, getting an overwhelming diagnosis, think about the caregiver trying to do every single thing for the child, going to work, coming home, trying to sit down and facilitate communication. I notice I didn't give you anything long to do at any one moment, right? But doing all of these, sometimes caregivers forget about this themselves. So remember to make time for yourself, right? Talk to a friend, a pastor, a counselor within a support group. Find personal time. Hobbies are great. Reading is great. Find time to do your nails, to walk. And yes, I can say walk outside, but remember, closing a bathroom door and sitting in the bathroom for even a few seconds can help when things feel a little bit too much. Socialize and maintain your relationships. And this one is important. We know that divorce rates or separations are higher in families with developmental disabilities than families without developmental disabilities. Take time for your friends, for your other children, for your partners. Accept help. The concept of respite care is a wonderful concept. Here in Jamaica, I learned very quickly before I even came back. Respite care is called auntie, uncle, grandma, grandpa. Take time, use those supports that you have around you, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Find your purpose, and your purpose can be finding something that you enjoy, a task that you like, going out there and finding something else, and not just become overwhelmed with what is happening at home. There are parent support groups. They exist in Kingston, in Montego Bay, in Mandeville. I think there's a second one in Montego Bay as well. But there are multiple support groups that you can make contact with. As one of the persons who are in charge of the JASA group likes to say to me, just remember that everybody works, so probably an email is better. In summary, guys, there is no crystal ball. Each child deserves the best we can offer. Never underestimate the value of a persistent, demanding, and involved parent or family. And as practitioners, we need to inform, but ensure that we are empathetic, we're mindful of the emotional turmoil that may ensue after a diagnosis. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. If anybody can keep us awake at 8:30 in the evening after an entire day of work, that would be Andrea Garbutt. That was really engaging, wasn't it, guys? That was essentially a 360-degree assessment of care of self and care of the individual suffering from autism. And that was excellent. I think that you can see the trend of the discussions. When Prof had presented earlier, she gave us essentially pathology, pathophysiology, and then morbidities, comorbidities. And then Dr. Garbutt has actually tied in the management and the coping. And of course, if you can see the trend of how things are going, and I hope you guys are all, you're typing your questions so that we can address them later on. You can see the trend that it would only make sense that at this point, we have a discussion with a family that has actually lived through this experience. So we've gone through.
Could we do the Q&A before that?
You want to do Q&A earlier? Sure.
Yeah, let's
All
do the
right.
Q&A before that, and also the sponsor presentation before we get
Okay.
into that.
All right.
Please. Because
So
I think we have, kidding us, I think we have 25 questions in the Q&A.
yes, we do. Yes, we do. I'm not sure if we're going to have time for all of them, but if both Prof and Dr. Garbutt could make themselves available, let's go through this. So the first one in the question bar is from Shernet Heslop Barnett, and she asks, where are we?
So
Did I miss-
Doc just answered it. Dr. Garwood just typed an answer to it a while ago. I think the question was, I don't remember.
Oh, sweating of the palms.
Right.
Right. All right. So Patella Williams, is it that Dr. Garbutt is going through the questions as we look at them?
No.
That was just that one.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so Patella Williams asks, I have no autism support group, so I'm asking for assistance and clarity. I'm not sure specifically what Patella is asking for clarity.
So I think what Patella is saying is that her child was diagnosed in 2022 at UA Child and Family Clinic. I'm assuming Patella is in and around the Kingston and St. Andrew area. I know that on the presentation that Dr. Garbutt showed, there were some contact information in particular for some speech therapists. So Patella, let us know if it's speech therapy or you're just looking for groups of other persons. And I think actually the family who will present later on may actually have some answers for you as far as where you can get the support. So Dr. Sajavi, I think we can go to the next one from Nicole.
Right, so I'm gonna go to a question from Nicole Hines. At what age do you consider it to be delayed speech or a symptom of autism spectrum disorder? So Dr. Garbutt or Prof. Sams, could you field that question for us?
This one was actually directed at Prof. Sams. So
Prof. Sams, okay.
Yeah.
At what age do you consider it to be delayed speech or a symptom of an autism spectrum disorder?
Well, there are a few little milestones that we use. So we expect children to be saying mama, dada, and one other word by the age of 1 year. We expect them to be putting 2 words together by about 18 months. And we're expecting them to begin to include pronouns and a few little adjectives by the time they get to be about 3 years. So it's not it has to be related specifically to the child's age and what is typical of that age, of the typical milestone for that age. So there wouldn't be a single specific feature. I just pulled out a few that we use when kids are younger. But just generally speaking, and if your child has difficulty having a conversation with you or does not engage a lot in conversation with you, when you ask how was school, whether your child can't answer that question, it's very, very dependent on the child's age as to what we consider to be delayed.
Thank you so much, Prof. Patella's follow-up in the chat is that she's looking for a school because her son, she continues to have to change schools because the schools that he's going to, they don't teach autistic kids. I know Dr. Garbutt spoke to a number of different institutions as well in Kingston that probably could help. Prof, any suggestions?
Yeah, so this is a common thing that parents of children with autism and with other developmental disabilities here. We can't, we don't have the facilities. And really, all we need are people who are supportive and caring to children who meet them at the stage of their development that they are at. Dr. Garbutt spoke about inclusion, and let me just clarify what inclusion means. Inclusion means that your child is in the same classroom with other children who don't have any additional needs. When you have integration, which is where we were many years ago as a priority, the kids were in the same school, but all the kids with special needs were in the same class. That is integration. Inclusion is the best thing for children, but we do not have a lot of persons who are comfortable with inclusion. And so there's been a push for us to ensure that our teachers are trained to develop an inclusive classroom. There's a course, for example, at the early childhood level about inclusive ECD.
Yes.
But early childhood is the point at which we find the most inclusion. So there are many little basic schools that are doing so well with having children with autism within the classroom with other children. And sometimes some of the, private schools are not doing so well at it. We don't have anybody trained in special ed, so we can't do this. But in all of this, I also say to parents that if you know that your child has challenges, and Dr. Garbutt mentioned some of them, challenges that will prevent them or make them less likely to be accepted into school, go and see your doctor. If there are behavior challenges, don't push in with behavior challenges. Go and speak with someone who can help you. Go see your pediatrician. Go see whichever specialist your child is. Go to the child and family clinic so that we can help to manage these behaviors so that the child, it will make it that much easier for the child to be in an inclusive setting.
Thank you. Through you, Dr. Sajabi, I see a question
Okay.
here. I know I won't be able to get to all of them.
Right.
It says, my daughter's in first form and not making friends. She likes going in corners by herself and goes on her tablet, but types and talks to persons on Roblox. For those who are listening, Roblox, if you don't know, is a very addictive video game, which I will keep my personal opinion on. She twitches her left eye when upset and stiffens her fingers, and she stays up late. But when we assessed her, she was said to not be on the autistic spectrum. What should I do? I think this is weird.
I think it's really important that you make sure that the persons who are assessing your child are actually trained to do assessments for children with autism. And there are not very many people who are able to do that. I see many children who come to me who have assessments that say they're not on the autism spectrum, and they actually are. So that's the first thing to do. Make sure that you are seeing somebody who is a qualified person to make that assessment. However, sometimes more features emerge with time. And so sometimes early on in a child's life, they may not have as many features and they may kind of be on the edge. And that's why follow up with someone who knows your child well, your pediatrician, your general practitioner. That's why it's so important to have the kind of follow-up with someone who knows your child so that they could be able to identify the differences that might occur over time.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sajabi, over to you.
Right. We have quite a few questions from anonymous attendee. Let me just get to a couple of those. Can a child lose an autism diagnosis as they get older? Dr. Garbutt is answering that question as we speak. Another one is, does a child who is verbal, has no speech impediments, but has limited functional speech to communicate needs, for example, I want water, I need help, require speech therapy separate and apart from ABA?
So that's a discussion to be had with your pediatrician and the therapist if your child is already in therapy and you're trying to determine whether the child can discontinue the therapy. And that's why Dr. Garbutt mentioned about goals. That's why it's very important that any kind of therapeutic intervention you're in, that you know what the goals are so that you will know when those goals have been achieved and when it's time to discontinue a service. Sometimes children are in therapy for different reasons. Sometimes it's because their words aren't clear. Sometimes it's because of problems with pronouns. Sometimes it's because of problems with context or tone or other problems. So it's important that that kind of discussion be had with the specialist in the field.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you. So we've gotten some from anonymous attendee, and now we're going to get one from Shanique Bennett. Is there any form of integration in the public care system for those unable to afford private assessments? Is there any form of integration in the public care system for those unable to afford private assessments?
The places that you are able to get assessments in the public system would be the Child and Family Clinic at the University Hospital and the Microcare Center. That would be the places that you would be able to get a form of assessment. The Microcare Center does not do specific assessments for autism at this time. So of the most comprehensive type of assessment would be available at the Child and Family Clinic, but you will have a long waiting list because of the prevalence that we mentioned. And you know, today I was sent something from a news agency that says kids are waiting for 4 years, up to 4 years for assessments in the UK. And there's been similar situations in the US. So what's happening to us here in Jamaica is happening all over. It's just that we've become overwhelmed by the prevalence. The services that we currently have were never designed for the kinds of prevalence that we're now seeing.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Please let me just interrupt here to say we have so many questions, and we don't have the time, unfortunately, to get to all of them. I see that Dr. Garbutt has been typing some answers, and I thank Prof for answering on screen some of these difficult questions, and sympathizing with persons for their situation that are based on the questions that they've presented. Dr. Sajabi, I think at this time we say thank you to Square and have them do their presentation, and then we go to our final presenter.
Yeah, Lanes. All right. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to ask Square Pharmaceuticals to join us and share with us their presentation. They are our sponsors for the evening. Welcome, guys. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Tamara Melville, and I'm the country manager for Square Pharmaceuticals, and we are proud to be the sole sponsor of this year's 50th anniversary PAJ conference. And on behalf of Square, we also want to congratulate the PAJ on this milestone. Square Pharmaceuticals is the #1 pharmaceutical company in Bangladesh. So I just want to share with you a little bit about the country. Bangladesh has a population size of 168 million, and they proudly produce 98% of their pharmaceutical needs. This creates an ecosystem to ensure that you have only the highest quality players participating. Square has held this strong leadership position since 1985 as being the #1 pharmaceutical company in Bangladesh, and we proudly export to over 42 countries, including the USA and the UK. Our manufacturing plants have global GMP approvals, including the US FDA and the UK MHRA. These GMP approvals ensures that we bring safe, quality, and affordable products to the market so that you can confidently prescribe our Square brands. In recognition of World Autism Day, research shows that a disproportionate number of autistic children also suffer from chronic allergic problems. Today, I'd just like to share with you 3 of our products from Square Pharmaceuticals that can be used to treat these allergic conditions. They are our Fexo suspension, Zymax suspension, and also our mometazone nasal spray. Fexofenadine is indicated for the treatment of seasonal allergic rhinitis in children 2 years to 11 years of age, and indicated for the treatment of chronic idiopathic urticaria in children 6 months to 11 years of age. Fexofenadine is an antihistamine with selective peripheral H1 receptor antagonist activity. The minimum duration of action is 12 hours, which would allow for twice-a-day dosing. Fexofenadine does not cross the blood-brain barrier. Research shows that it is the least sedating of all antihistamines. This makes it an excellent option for your school-age children, especially now that they're doing external exams in grade 4, 5, and 6. We want to ensure that they will remain alert and focused in classes, and especially while they're doing an exam. I'm going to share with you some of the drug interactions that you need to be mindful of when prescribing fexofenadine. When taken with erythromycin or ketoconazole, the plasma concentrations of fexofenadine have been shown to increase. You also have to be aware when prescribing it along with an antacid containing magnesium or aluminum hydroxide, as this can reduce the absorption of a fexofenadine molecule. Another product that you should be aware of when prescribing with fexofenadine is fruit juices, such as orange juice or grapefruit juice may reduce the bioavailability of fexofenadine, and therefore it is recommended that they be taken 2 hours before or 2 hours after dosing the drug. Similarly, the same consideration should be given when prescribing along with a magnesium or aluminum containing antacid. The dosage of our Fexo suspension is for children 6 months to less than 2 years is 2.5 ml every 12 hours. For children 2 years to 11 years, it's 5 ml every 12 hours. And for children 12 and up and adults, it is 10 ml every 12 hours. Our Fexo suspension has a pleasant raspberry flavor and is readily available on the market. Other Square options available on the market to treat acute rhinosinusitis are Zymax and nasal spray. Zymax is our azithromycin formulation, available as 250 mg capsule, a 500 mg caplet, and a 15 and 30 ml suspension. The suspension has a pleasant cherry banana flavor. The dosage for treating acute bacterial sinusitis for adults is 500 mg once a day for 3 days, and for children 6 months and older, it's 10 mg per kilogram once a day for 3 days. Nasal spray is our mometazone furoate nasal spray. The dosage for treating allergic rhinosinusitis in children 2 to 11 years is 1 spray in each nostril once per day, and for patients 12 years and over, it's 2 sprays in each nostril once per day. Our Square pharmaceutical products are specially formulated for your pediatric patients as they are safe, palatable, and effective.
Hi, my name is Monique Irons and I'm an educator. Today I want to address a critical aspect of pediatric care and the importance of doctors recommending the correct medication to keep our students alert in class. As an educator and a parent myself, I cannot stress enough how important it is for our children to stay alert and awake in class. I have witnessed the struggle of students staying alert in class due to drowsiness caused by medication. Medication that can cause sedation, especially around the time of external examination, can be detrimental to students' success. For a lot of Jamaican students, education is the key to their future goals and aspirations. Therefore, I urge pediatricians to be cautious when recommending medication, as we need to keep our children happy, healthy, alert, and enjoying their educational journey.
Hi, my name is Dr. Tanoya Burrows. I am a PharmD clinical pharmacist, director of R.A. Williams, and the managing director of Liver Pharmacy Limited. At my pharmacies, we focus on pediatric care through the provision of specialized compounding services, and we even have a Little Ones Kids Club. Our mission is to ensure that our little patients have a positive and lasting interaction with us as healthcare professionals. As a 19-year pharmacy veteran, I thought I had the optimal approach to pediatric care until I became a mother. Imagine me, the flag bearer of patient compliance and medication adherence against a 2-year-old. I failed miserably. The tantrums, the crying, the running away, and him even saying, "Mommy, you're killing me." It broke my heart. I'm just asking that as physicians and as pharmacists, we pay more attention to the palatability of the medications that we prescribe and dispense. I had the opportunity to reconstitute every product to find the one that was most palatable. Imagine the parent that doesn't have that resource. I think we should pay close attention to palatability and prescribe and dispense accordingly.
Great. Thank you so much. Square Pharmaceuticals, Dr. Shajavi, back to you, sir.
Back to me. Thanks so much, Sam. Good stuff. All right. So I guess we kind of left the best for last, kind of. Let's see. So we're actually gonna discuss with the Alains their journey through having a child with autism. So Terry and Lowenfield Alain are professionals serving in the accounting and management industry. They're devoted Christians and quite service-oriented. They enjoy giving back to their community through their time and their means. And it is for this reason that they started Autistic Edge. It's a safe space where anyone can share their experience with autism and invite others to also demonstrate what the journey has meant to them. Autistic Edge is a YouTube channel that is used to share tips and tricks on how to navigate the autism journey. It started in July 2022 as a community initiative for parents and stakeholders that support children that are managing autism. And its intent is to raise awareness and promote acceptance. The Alains share a 12-year-old son, Alex Xavier, who was diagnosed at 3 years old with severe autism. And he was diagnosed in 2014. Over the years, they struggled to find effective intervention strategies and personnel to address his developmental challenges. This led them to do extensive research in this area, and they have a heightened interest in speech, especially because he was nonverbal up to 9 years of age. Through home-administered speech therapy, these exercises helped him to transition from being nonverbal to using single words and then to short phrases. They are deep advocates on behalf of the autism community, and they lend their voice and platform to garner support from all stakeholders. They have extended their reach beyond the borders of Jamaica to other countries and territories around the globe. Autism is a global challenge, and they have dedicated themselves to assisting and championing this cause in every possible way they can. So they're going to discuss with us sharing for empowerment, the Alains experience raising a severely autistic child in Jamaica. So please welcome Terry-Ann and Lowenfield.
All right, good evening, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Sajavi, for that introduction. Thank you, Dr. Curtis Price, for the invitation for us to share on this particular platform. And I want to recognize Professor Sams Vaughan as well. And, Dr. Garbo, thank you very much for those presentations that went before us. So we're going to go quickly in terms of sharing our experience. Let me just quickly get to it. Our intent this evening is to share with you what our journey has been like, and ultimately we'll be able to help to influence those that are on the platform that are coping and struggling with a child with such a diagnosis. So let's just jump right in. So these are their lanes. We're a small family, just one child, and mommy and daddy. And I am gonna share with you right now just a quick video that gives you a synopsis of where we started and ultimately how we got here.
The Lord bless me with one little son. Me not have to tell you so nothing can done. After a while, started to walk, but then we realized say him not talk. We get referral to go a speech therapy. All you know, I take me money. A few years pass and no update. I tell you, it is a sad state. Insomnia, inhabitually. I don't know. Night, we don't get no sleep. Hours past midnight, we still out the street. Head all hurt, feel like weird. My husband did gone foreign. They just couple weeks for work training. So one fear night, go at 1:30. On the boulevard, and me and him one. Boy, me I tell you, I can't till a week. I'll drive, a little rest, me I sleep. All me I try, even one drop of sleep. When we glance through the mirror, no you that a peep. You see it? Me a drive all along the van, a bump and a glide. Me a wonder how I go on my side. When we check a stop, we drop asleep. When we realize the van park on a heap. That no cheap. One day we take a stroll down a halfway tree. My one little son, my hubby and me. We a walk and a talk and a have a good laugh. Then we feel something bounce from the foot cat. Our little son never want go nowhere, but we never understand where he try till we say. So he keep with my foot, make one big pull. Don't see me drop flat and ground like the stroke by a bull. One fine day we take a trip to the beach. My son get excited from we reach. Needless to say we have enough fun. Now we ready to go home, cause the fun done. When we take a stop, one sentence, kiss me let back with some gone missing. You want to see we just a run up and down. See me heart in my mouth out to drop out and ground. The searching lasts for a little bit a while. When the hubby find him in the water smile. Needless to say, my hubby can't swim, so I want next man he have to send go for him. Everywhere locked down, online me a preach. School door shut, and me have to teach. Through my son, it not have no speech. Most of the time, it's difficult to reach. Teacher said word, me not trust in our prescription. Only Jesus alone we can depend on. Enough more things we could have shared with you. But guess what? We don't have work to go do. Right now, I will pass 9. We will tell you some more when we see you next time. Guess what? Make me do a little bribe. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.
All right. I trust that you enjoyed that one. That was just a sneak peek.
Yeah, that was just a sneak peek into our life, telling us, you know, a little summary of some of the things that we go through. And just in the interest of time, we're just gonna go quickly through the presentation that we have. So here on the screen, meet Alex Xavier. He's our son, our one and only, and he developed normally up until about 1 year old, and by 1 going to 2, we start seeing some regression. And some of the things that we had there in his regression is he wasn't looking at you as we thought he should. Repetitive behavior. Up to 1, he was able to tell you that he was 1 year old, giving us that finger sign. And then after that, the milestone tends to go in the opposite direction, which we would say, you know, regress. And then we got the big hit of jumping forward to talking to our pediatrician and going through the recommendation and the assessments and stuff. And it was about after 3 thereabout that we got our confirmation that yes, he was on the autism spectrum. And fast forward to now, we of course we enroll in a number of therapies. We were recommended to be doing speech therapy, ABA therapy, occupational therapy, and of course he was also attending one of the special needs institution with a student assistant, which we refer to as shadow. We eventually had to discontinue therapy because, I mean, speech therapy and ABA therapy, we discontinued those because of lack of results and impact. I mean, after about 2.5 to 3 years, and we would have indicated in the poem just now, you know, we were not getting any results. I mean, we show no sign of improvement. I mean, some of the things, we didn't even know what to do. We weren't even getting reports and all those things. So it was, I mean, other than the fact that it was very expensive, need I tell you, because when we talk about ABA therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, all these comes with a cost. Paying a special need person comes with a cost. And of course, the institution in which he was enrolled, of course, also came with a high cost. And for us, we were looking at probably about 900 and something thousand per term, every 3 months rather, to cater for these kind of therapy sessions. So being going through these different therapies and not getting the results, of course, we were very despondent and we discontinued at this time. All right, moving to our next step. So just to fast forward a little bit, all this was happening in the nick of time for us. I mean, we were going through all the different emotions as if you could have think of. Now, fast forward to our COVID experience. Now, when COVID stepped in for us, we had to go into homeschool. Now, like many other persons, we withdrew our son from school prior to the government lockdown, of course. And our student assistant was asked to stay home for the first 3 months of the pandemic. Now, Alex was one of the child who could not handle the virtual instruction. So for us, we came into work at home as well, and coming into work at home was a plus for us, was a big plus for us. Now, this is where we eventually developed some skills that we didn't even know we had. So we became teachers, we became principal, we became supervisor, we became speech therapists, we became ABA therapists, we became occupational therapists, and you name a few. And I mean, instructions through Google Classroom was what we used at the time. I mean, Alex is not the child who is going to sit in front of any of these sessions. So when we put him in front of the computer, the first day, he just pitched the computer over, and that almost cost us a new computer, but we were alert. Now, lesson plans and stuff for him, when we got the work from the teacher and we were going over, we realized that, boy, you know, things were not at his level and all of that. And of course, going through this emotion, we became anxious and everything going in a topsy-turvy mode. We really and truly don't know what to do. And we couldn't even blame the teachers either. Everybody were just thrown into this situation of operating online. That's not the best for these kids. And for us, we just have to start doing some extensive research. Now, I just have to be asking myself logical questions. Now, of course, we are accountants and we work in the corporate world, and we know what it is like to plan. We know what it is like to set goals and to make sure, and there are measurable goals. So we take a little from our work situation and we say, listen, we are going to apply this to what is supposed to be happening with Alex Xavier. So we begin by doing some extensive research to find what's the best way to engage him and all of those kind of stuff. Now, while we were going along and we were sharing little snippets of what we were doing with some of our friends, and we started getting some real results. I mean, we were blown away as to the responses that we were seeing coming from Alex Xavier. I mean, during that period, we got the first word out of him, which was daddy. No, I am not jealous because I was the one who taught him to say daddy. All right. So the first word we got out of him there was daddy. We had to learn speech therapy on our own. And when we say learn speech therapy, anywhere I could find a course or any little short thing that tells me or give me sufficient information, I just had to jump up and just learn it and read it. And my husband, of course, would be my audience. Anything that I find, it doesn't matter how stupid it looks, right? We just had to say, hey, dear, look at this for me. Tell me how this works and what you think about this. And we went through all of that. And we have to start learning speech therapy technique and language. So it was then that we discovered that, oh, there is actually an approach to speech therapy. Before we start talking about formative language and stuff, we first need to learn receptive language and all of those stuff, and for the child to be able to understand even the instruction that you're giving him. So every now and again, you take a step forward, you have to pull back, and we were basically on our own going through this. And of course, at this time, it wasn't very easy. So the behavior, Alex is on the severe end of the spectrum. So he was nonverbal, he was ADHD, he has insomnia, and he has behavioral issues, excessive repetitive behavior. We had sensory issues with loud noise. We had sensory disorder as well. Fine motor skills not developed. I mean, during COVID, when we exercised, we studied a little bit on the occupational therapist, and then we were able to put some strategies in place, of course, in teaching him to write effectively and all of that. And not to mention the great insomnia, because there were so many nights that we got little or no sleep, and we just had to function. And in the poem just now, we shared a little bit of one night when the car ran off the road with me, because I was actually driving around, because he would normally fall asleep by motion. So I was driving around at about after 1 a.m. trying to get him to sleep. And I mean, I fell asleep instead. And of course, the van ran off the road and some of these things. So then he wouldn't sit through any sessions before. We had to come up with strategies in terms of how we engage him. And one of my engaging behavior with Alex Xavier was through storytelling. initially Alex would work more with the caregivers. So the caregivers would be able to give him instructions. The caregivers would be able to do little things with him, and he would be more participative. I had 2 great caregivers, and I have to, say thanks so much to them for being there during these times when he would not have cooperated with us. They were very instrumental then. When you talk about support, and we know a lot of parents lack this kind of support, and we have to say we give it to our caregivers, because we had one caregiver who would just say to us, listen, we know some young people, we know no married people, no need to have no time sometimes. So guess what? Take some time and carry him come, and those kind of stuff. So we had those kind of support, and we have to give thanks for these people. So when we started telling him stories, and he would never listen to me. No, I was kind of good at storytelling. Not sure if I'm an expert, but at least I tried. So how I engage him in storytelling, I build my little props, and we try to engage him. And when I get him to sit down, I'll say, all right, the title of the story is. But by the time I said the title of the story is, Alex would disappear. No, I felt so broken, deflated, and you name all the words there, despondent and stuff, because I could not get through to my own child. But I, as my husband would have encouraged me, and I also want to say big thank you to this wonderful specimen from the masculine gender sitting right here beside me. He has been an instrument and a backbone and everything to what I will do for this child. He was just very supportive in what we'd have to do. So my husband would be the encourager, and he would say, all right, dear, yeah, me no say it no so, but we're going to keep trying and all of that. I said, all right, we're going to do that. And the following week, when we said the title of the story, Alex gone for a run again. And I was like, okay, this not gonna work. We're not going to get it. The following week, the title of the story. Now, one of the week, something stood out, because whenever he ran away from the dining table, he wouldn't go very far. He would go in the living area. So I said, let me just check and see what is happening. And I started telling the story. But then, I don't know whether he was listening or not. I said, you know what? I am not going to sit up until 12 o'clock in the night building all of these props and me no get a chance to tell my story. So I am going to tell my story. So what I started doing was telling the story to the wall that was in front of me. Now, as I started telling the story to the wall and being very animated and all of that stuff, something said to me, just check and see what's happening on the other side. Now, when I looked on the other side, I realized that Alex was staring at me. Now, for me, I said, that's an attention getter. So right then and there, I realized I was getting his attention. And this is one of the first and important aspect of being able to work with them, and that is to get their attention. It was one of the very unconventional approaches, but we tried it nonetheless. Now, needless to say, I went quite a few weeks standing up, building out my props and telling the story to the wall before I could get the child to sit at the table for at least a minute. But as weeks go by, telling the story to the wall, we tried that and we could get a minute, then we could get 2 minutes, then we could get 3 minutes. And today we can say Alex will sit and listen to a storytelling for up to an hour without any, without any interruption. Thank you very much. So now, fast forward, we started seeing one word for him is receptive language skills were improving. Then we started getting 1 and 2 words. And just to say, jump to now Alex is able to say good morning, bye, see you later, happy Sabbath, and he will also say a full prayer to go to his bed, and he will answer to minimal greeting. Now, one of the ways in which we do speech therapy with him as well, I refer to my type of speech therapy as being functional, just being able for him to ask for things for his needs, because before he wasn't saying anything, being able to help him. And we took him to the zoo one day, and our speech therapy, it was a speech therapy exercise that we actually had at the zoo. And we have to come up with all of these activities at home. This was part of our summer school program, and it's a field trip, and we took him to the zoo. And this is just me, my caregiver, and my husband had to work that day. And now we're going to share with you a speech therapy articulation. It's just a few seconds. This was a speech therapy articulation exercise we had at the zoo, and our goal here is that we were working on the expressive language and the articulation.
Alex, what's the name of the animal? Mommy. What is the name of the animal? Mommy. Monkey. Monkey. What's the name of the animal, Alex? Alex is monkey. Mommy. I'm going to put it by yourself. Alex is
All right. As we look to bring the presentation to this next level, this is our final area that we're gonna be covering. You see, we have to make this fun. This is a journey, and we have to make it fun and functional. So I liked the presentation that Dr. Garbot did, because that was really a 360-degree view. I agree totally. And I'm going to share what our experience has been as parents. Now that we have this child that has been diagnosed with autism, how do we cope, right? So one, we have to make lifestyle changes. As we talk about that initial shock and disappointment, when we got the news, Alex Xavier was the planned one, right? We planned for only one child, and he's still the only child for us. So you can just imagine when we learned that, the child that we planned for is diagnosed with this particular condition, and we knew very little, if anything, about the condition at all. But we quickly adjusted and adapted. We learned that this is a condition that it's potentially lifelong, right? I saw somebody asking the question, does one get out of the autism diagnosis, etc. We know that we're in this for the long haul, so we have to plan for long term. That is very, very important. We had to make some mental adjustments. We know our child is not that child that's gonna get invited to some of these birthday parties. Our child is not the one that persons will readily want to bring into their care. Chances are, because they are not familiar with the condition and how to interact with him. So sometimes it may not be a case that folks don't want to, but they are careful about having that kind of child around. And then this one is a big one for us, advice overload. Everybody has something to share with you in terms of how to handle the child. So we had to be very careful about how we manage the advice we were getting from folks. Then here's what I'll call no shame, blame, guilt, judgment. So we faced a lot of disapproval from persons, because persons are ignorant of the condition. The way they interact with us varied tremendously. And then not to mention those persons who would be looking on, and then the eyes would say a lot, and then the body language, etc. And then as parents, we start to blame ourselves. Terry-Ann looking into her past to see, is there something that within family history and so on that would have led to this, me doing the same, and so on. So we started to see what's going on there. And then there's this feeling of guilt. Having a child is a full-time job, but having a special needs child is twice a full-time job. But even with the doing that we've been doing, we still feel like we're just not doing enough. And then there is just the judgment that comes a lot of times from persons just criticizing. Persons we get labeled as bad parents and picnic rude and how you can control your child, and all of those sort of things are things that we find that we have to cope with. And then yeah, I'll finish this one and then you'll close there. Right? So Dr. Garbutt mentioned that the divorce rate among parents with children with ASD is higher than parents with any other disability. That is so true. Then you also find that the divorce rate in the earlier years of the child is even greater. But one thing that I can share between Terrian and I is that, you know, when Terrian became concerned, because I learned that it's the husband more often than not, or the man in the relationship more often than not, that will take flight. She became concerned because this you know, is the only child for both of us, and she wondered if there was risk of me leaving. But I'm happy that she shared that she had that concern, so that I could reaffirm that I'm in this, you know, through thick and thin. You know, we take our vows.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say exactly how he said it, you know, because when I was at that moment of despondency and despair and like my entire world is gonna fall apart, and reading that the percentage of relationships that fall apart because of this kind of situation, my husband sat me down and, you know, he said to me, listen, this is not your problem. This is our problem. I don't know where you plan to go, but I ain't going nowhere. And that gave me a platform in which to launch that, hey, this was a relationship that I could give it my all. And we're saying this on this platform because, you know, as we go along there, this is so much experience for many other parents who are listening. You know, one spouse maybe just holding the major part of the burden, the other one not available. And as you talk about fight or flight, we are in this together, and that's what the partnership is all about. I know that I am the one into most of the preparation for these lesson plans and all of this, but I could not have done it without my husband, because guess what? If I am doing lesson plan in the middle of the night, you know that he's gonna be doing the washing and it's like in our house, there's no rule that is gender specific. There's nothing that is too hard for him to do. And when I will say to anybody, the only thing that my husband does not do is breastfeed. And my husband will tell us that him to breastfeed in his own way.
Right. All right. So the other part of this is the finances, and Perian touched on that a while ago. It is incredibly expensive. It is incredibly expensive. We have to pay for a student assistant for Alex Xavier, and we've had to be doing this for years. And then we have the school fees, you have the therapy costs, then you have the increased even transportation costs and stuff that you have to factor in, and many other fees. When you talk about material, we buy material. I mean, we have to be looking at space to store different things, because we want to give our child, you know, a fighting chance. So it is pretty expensive. And then when it comes down to medical bills, because Alex was nonverbal for a while, the least little thing we have to run to the doctor, because we have no clue. He can't tell us, you know, sometimes all you see is the tears. He can't indicate if it's his hand that is hurting, his head is hurting, his tummy is hurting. So you have to do a lot of investigation. So you spend a lot of money on medical bills. And then the therapy sessions that will need to be done, as we covered. When the child is like Alex Xavier on the severe end of the spectrum, then you find that almost all of the different intervention therapies are ones that you'll need to do if you want to have the results. So where did the money go? We're spending it on our child. The Lord has been good to us in terms of providing us with the resources that we need in order to manage the condition for Alex. But my heart goes out a lot of times when I think about those single parents that are out there that are having those kind of challenges, and ultimately how do they cope. So as we look to wrap up, this is our final slide, and I'll allow Terian to walk us through.
Right. So how do we really cope through these times? It's very difficult. We are not gonna tell you that it's easy. We might be looking a little bright in our face, but we are always tired parents. But a couple of things we have told ourselves that we have to be deliberate. We have to be consistent with whatever we are doing. And what propels me more than all is that when I am putting in these little strategies and stuff, and we saw the improvement that we are getting, I am just like a light bulb that you turn on. I just want to do more. And sometimes I still feel bad, like, am I still doing enough? And I still want to do more. But for us as parents, we have to be deliberate about our quality time. We take frequent vacations to clear our heads sometimes. And vacation sometimes, going with him is very expensive. If we want a good vacation, if we're going to a hotel, believe you me, it's like a team that we have to be taking along with us. We have the caregiver, we may have a friend that come along with us, and that is for us to ensure that we get some quality time, because we treat him like our handbag anyway, because we're not going anywhere, leave him, right? Spend time in shared activities is what we do a lot. As you hear, we talk about sharing. Actually, everything we do, we are very inclusive, and we keep the lines of communication very open between us so that none of us gets too overwhelmed at any time. I mean, we have what we refer to in our little family as board meeting. So whenever there are major things to discuss, we call a board meeting. So we don't get into any intense conversation outside of our board meeting session that will give any opportunity for anybody who is overwhelmed and tired to be yapping at each other. And these are just strategies. So when we get to this board meeting, we have a plan. We know what we're going to talk about. We iron out this thing. Just like in business, and we are business people, when you go to business, you're going to look at budgets, you're going to look at targets, you're going to look at your reality, and you're going to see where the gap is. We take this similar approach to our board meetings. We look at the issue, we talk about them, we don't blame each other for them. And when we come out of these sessions and we make decisions, if at the end of the day, the decision is really not the best decision that we make, I am not the person who's going to say, say, Lowenfield, are you cause this become me tell you say, and no, we don't do that. My husband will come back and say, boy, dear, this never work out today, And I said, it really never work out, dear. And I say, all right, I guess we have a lesson learned here. What we try to do instead of overwhelming ourselves with everything that is happening, we look at the lessons learned and where we can improve. So, and we take the same approach to the strategies that we invent for Alex Xavier. Some of these things, when we are doing them, it is very distressing at times when we work with him and we really don't get the feedback or we don't get the results that we want. But guess what? We take a step back, we look at it again, and we move forward. We are the persons who understand that it's okay not to be okay. So we're very supportive of each other. There are times when, like, I would just feel like I would tear out my hair. And my husband will, all right, dear, never mind, take a break, and we hug each other and whatever. I mean, we have to dig into our faith a lot of times and remember, we told the Lord one thing: if it is his will, it's his bill. And if it's his choice, it's his invoice. And to date, we can say the Lord has honored all his bills, and he has also paid up every invoice that we have had. This is just a synopsis, a little synopsis of us. Where can you find us? We have started this YouTube channel, and because of the results that we are getting, and when we were sharing, it was overwhelming for a lot of parents. We hear the cry. A lot of parents have so many questions, and I have to be saying to my husband, boy, dear, if we have it so hard at home, can you imagine what is happening with some of the other parents out there? So we share on our channel tips and tricks of how we navigate our journey. We share right now we have about 98 videos on our channel since we started in COVID 2 years ago. We have been getting some excellent feedback from parents who have reached out to us to say, hey, you know, your videos are very good. We try to explain why the videos, and then we go into examples of how we actually administer our little therapies that we have come up with and stuff. We have been getting good feedback from parents. You know, they have tried some of the strategies, it's working. We have to remind them, hey guys, we're not professional, but we're just sharing our strategies, and be mindful that we need to look at strategies at the level. And we have actually worked with some of the parents to kind of say, hey, this that you're trying, your child you may need to break down the activity a little bit more if you're trying it. When you set targets, try not to be working on the same thing for 6, 7, 8, 9 months and you're not getting anything. It may mean that the approach is not correct. You may need to step back. You may need to get your therapist to help you and all of that. But even if you're working, getting a therapist, I know that a lot of our parents are on a waiting list right now, as we have said. But guess what? The little that you are getting, if you're working with a speech therapist, as Dr. Garbutt indicated, it's only half-an-hour sessions you have with the speech therapist. So parents, we have to jump in, we have to dive in, and we just have to stay afloat. The aim, there's just one word that I have to give to any and every parent out there. Be consistent. If you're tired, take a break, but get back to it in any short order. Anything you have to say in closing, love?
What I need to say is to thank you, everybody, for the time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share. Just remember, autism is a journey, and trust me, learning takes place every day. Back to you, Dr. Sajab.
Wow. 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 Guys, that's inspirational. That's really, really inspirational. A lot of individuals go through their trials and they internalize them and they don't use it as an opportunity to help and heal others. So by no means is this easy for you. And by no means is it supposed to be trivialized, the difficulties that you've been through. But the mere fact that you can share your journey and it can help one person, just one person, and I'm sure it's helped many, many more. But just for you to be able to impact someone's life so they can do a little bit better in their journey, well done, guys. Well done. Do you have any questions for the Alains? I know people have been posting how wonderful they think the presentation has been. And are there any questions specifically for these presenters? Remember, the first 2 presenters would have answered quite a few questions. Anything for anybody to share or to ask? Or have you guys said it all? Possibly. All right.
Yeah, I think they said it all. Congratulations, really wonderful presentation. I think what sticks out is, Lord, if it's your choice, it's your invoice. Lord, if it's your will, it's your bill. And I love the fact that you wrapped up by saying the Lord has paid his bill. That's amazing. We do have one question. Patella Williams, who has been asking and participating with Pen Patella, is asking, how did you overcome the denial phase?
Yeah. Here's the thing. One thing I've learned about, life, and even in my studying, I used to have a teacher that says you have one day that you need to be sorry over a poor result. You get 24 hours to mourn. And then after the 24 hours, you need to just get back up and just start to handle it. No, I'm not saying that's what I recommend for folks, because with everybody it's different. But for Terry and I, what we looked at is to say, hey, this is a reality that we're just staring down the barrel of this gun. The quicker we come to grips and come to terms with what's going on. As a matter of fact, we didn't know what we were going to do at all. But one thing we knew is that this is the situation. It has been confirmed. There were suspicions before. Now that we have the confirmation, what do we do next, right? And I think Dr. Garbutt covered quite a bit of that in terms of the feedback from the parents. It's you have to embrace that reality, and just, you know, kind of put your shoulders to the wheel, and don't be afraid to fail as well, because sometimes we try stuff and they don't work. Terry and gave you the story about, you know, how she was working with Alex Xavier, telling the story to the wall. It doesn't work, and it can become overwhelming sometimes, but never stop trying.
And one of the reality for me is in getting in this quickly was it's not about us. And I mean, the parents will blame the brunt of this responsibility because the care, the denial, and all the different emotions that we have to go through. But quickly, we have to realize that it was not about us. What ended up happening is I have to quickly realize that if I am going to help my child, I need to quickly overcome my personal issues, and it's about helping him. The longer I stay in denial, it's the longer I'll be able to get anything reasonable, worth it, and to be able to give him any help. And we had to get to that quickly. And the support, of course, of our friends that we had around us, you know, to encourage us and be there for us, that propels us as well.
Excellent, excellent. Very good. So at this time, Sam, is there anything further that you'd like to add before we
No,
wrap
just
up?
my thanks. I think we wrap up now and go to the vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I'd like to take this opportunity for the presenters as well as the committee that put this webinar together, to thank all of you participants for being with us this evening. These evening webinars are challenging, but I think I speak for everyone by saying that this was extremely informative. The way that the presentations were weaved together, first from Prof with the discussion of the 50 faces of autism and the evolution of autism through severity, sex, and age, having us understand the pathophysiology and the comorbidities associated with autism. Then Dr. Garbutt discussing with us what we can offer families and offer the children that are living with autism. And just remembering that positivity and action over apathy is the thing that is necessary to move forward and propel us in this condition. And then wrapping up the icing on the cake, the Elaine's discussing with us their journey, really a testimonial that all of us can, if we can't necessarily apply it to having to live with a child with autism, we can certainly apply the positives that they've shared with us throughout our lives. And of course, we all appreciate the adage of the accountants that was used towards the end of the presentation. I'd like to thank Square Pharmaceuticals for being with us this evening and providing the wherewithal for us to get this webinar up and running. And again, we thank the PAJ and its planning committee. We thank Oldgate and especially the attendants. We thank you for your time. I hope nobody fell asleep. Peace out.
Peace out. And let me thank you, Dr. Sajavi, for your punctuality, promptness, your leadership, and how you have guided us through this day. Thank you so much for your moderation and being a moderator tonight as well. Congratulations again to the PAJ. And thanks to everyone. It was a wonderful discussion. I usually would say we went a little bit over time, but tonight I think it was just the perfect timing based on the conversation. And we thank all the presenters, all the attendees for sharing your time, most valuable resource that you have. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Of course, remember the PAJ is 5K, raising money and funds and awareness around autism. That flyer has been shared in the chat a number of times. Please download it. Please go to the link that was shared as well. And for those who are seeking continuing medical education points for this webinar. Please remember to make your payment and submit that payment to the PAJ email. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Just remind everybody about Black River on the 24th and 25th of April. We're going to be discussing finding your abilities through disabilities, the Jamaican perspective. So we expect to see you there. All right.
Perfect. And special guest speaker for that one will be Nike Boy. So looking forward to that one. All right, everyone.
All right. Night,
Have a good
everybody.
evening.
Safe travel. Bye-bye.
Cheers.